What if every choice you've ever made was never really yours? Maybe it was the coffee you picked this morning, the person you fell in love with, or even the moment you clicked on this video. Somewhere between neurons and narrative, between physics and philosophy, something may have already decided for you. Tonight, we're not here to debate. We're here to drift. Because beyond the buzz of free will and fate lies a quieter question. What happens when we let go of control and simply observe the mystery? In the next few hours, I'll take you through 100 doors, each one opening into a theory, a whisper, a fragment of understanding that might just make you wonder or sleep. So find stillness. Let the world soften. Let your thoughts dissolve like ink in water. And if you're ready, we'll begin this journey where logic unravels and dreams begin. The whisper before thought. Before any word forms, before any decision crystallizes, there is only a flicker, a breathless murmur beneath awareness, a whisper not from you, but through you. They say it begins with a choice. But tonight, in the still quiet of your room, I'll ask you gently, what if it begins even before that? What if the voice in your head was never truly yours? There's something oddly comforting about letting that question settle in, like walking into a room and finding someone already there, finishing your sentence with perfect timing. A moment just like this once happened to Mia. She told me over tea one evening. I was about to say something, but then he said it first. The exact same words. It was like my thoughts had walked out of my head without permission. And the funny part? She couldn't tell if she'd thought them at all. Science offers a peculiar companion to this feeling. Benjamin Libet, a neuroscientist with a stopwatch and a spark of rebellion, studied intention with electrodes and time logs. What he found was unsettling. The brain begins preparing for an action milliseconds before a person becomes aware of wanting to act. It's as if your hand moves, and only afterward do you feel like you meant to. A nod from biology, quietly telling you, I've already started. And your consciousness? Just catching up. In this quiet, you start to notice things differently. Maybe the way your legs walk toward the fridge before you feel hungry, or how a name slips from your lips before you've decided to speak it. You might even hear someone ask, "Why did you do that?" And your reply comes too quickly, smooth, logical, clean. But inside, you're not quite sure. If the thoughts that shape your life arrive uninvited, can you claim them as your own? That's the tremble at the heart of this paradox. The implications curl outward like ripples in a pond. If free will is a story we're told after the fact, then ethics becomes a tale of puppets rewarding or punishing one another for strings they can't see. Can you blame the fire for burning the paper? Can you thank the wind for blowing your way? Maybe what we call will is the moment a wave realizes it's water. Not the ocean's captain, just its shape. And yet, there's beauty in that too. As we lie here in this hush, you don't need to solve it. Let the question drift like incense into the air. You are not here to answer. You're here to soften, to release, to float. And when you wake, perhaps the thought will still be with you. Or perhaps it will have passed through, like a guest whose name you never quite caught. Now, breathe in. Let go of the need to steer, and follow me gently into the next layer of the labyrinth, where we'll ask, if the brain is a machine, can it ever be free? The illusion of the self. You wake in the morning, eyes still hazy, and catch your reflection in the mirror. You think, there I am. But are you? Is that shape, that face, that quiet storm of thought behind your gaze truly you, or merely a trick of persistence, a pattern mistaken for permanence? Modern psychology and ancient wisdom whisper the same unsettling truth. The self you cling to might not be there at all. In Buddhism, this is the doctrine of anatta, non-self, a teaching so subtle, so radical, it slips through the fingers of logic. It says you are not your name, not your memories, not even your breath. You are not a soul in a shell. You are the shell and the breeze passing through it, like a candle flame that dances, warms, even guides, but leaves no trace of its shape once gone. Science, too, edges closer to this spiritual precipice. Neuroscientists have peeked behind the curtain and found not a conductor, but a chorus. Your thoughts, narrated. Your identity, compiled. Your story is being written by a brain that never pauses to check if the main character exists. You're more of a memoir than a being, a myth held together by familiar habits and the mind's talent for continuity. Do you ever wonder, she asks, stirring her tea slowly, if we're just watching our own highlight reel and mistaking it for a self? He smiles faintly, the kind that hides a shiver. Every memory I have, it's been edited 100 times. Sometimes I'm not sure if I'm remembering or just rehearsing a lie I liked enough to keep. And yet we feel so real, she whispers, like there's someone home. Maybe feeling real, he replies, is just the best story the brain knows how to tell. If we aren't fixed, then who exactly is steering the wheel of choice? If there's no stable core, who decides whether to say yes or no, to forgive or to walk away? These aren't just abstract questions. They echo in every regret, every decision, every quiet ache of responsibility. Without a self, does will still exist? Or is it merely an echo in a hollow chamber, loud enough to convince us of its origin? When the self dissolves into illusion, the idea of freedom flickers like that same candle flame, bright but untouchable. And in that strange twilight, we must ask, are we living our lives or simply watching them unfold like a film we never truly wrote? Now let's shift our gaze inward, into the mechanisms that hum beneath our illusions, into the machine, the neurons, the pulses, the chain reactions that pretend to be freedom. And let's ask the question no mirror can answer. If a brain fires without a self behind it, can anything within it ever be truly free? Clockwork Consciousness. You didn't mean to stay up this late, or maybe you did. That small moment, reaching for your phone, tapping the screen, letting this voice begin, did it feel like a choice? Or did it simply happen, like leaves falling in autumn, guided not by will but by wind? There's something quiet and haunting about the tick of a clock in the dark. It never questions, never hesitates. One moment gives way to the next, as if the universe itself were following a script etched into time. What if your mind is just like that? A clock, intricate, precise, unfolding thought by thought, not by freedom, but by necessity. Two strangers cross paths in a late-night diner. One stirs her coffee slowly, distracted. The other sits across from her, noticing the rhythm of her spoon, then asks, "Do you think you chose this life?" She blinks, unsure if it's a joke. "No," she says, "but I remember choosing it." That memory she trusts, it's just another tick, another cog clicking into place. This is where the idea of determinism begins to curl around the edges of consciousness. Every thought you've ever had, every word you've spoken, each smile or silence, what if they all came from causes before you were even born? From the chemistry of ancestors, the architecture of neurons, the gravity of time itself? What if you were always going to say yes? Always going to stay quiet? Always going to feel a little guilty afterward? In the 18th century, a mind named Laplace imagined a being who knew the position and motion of every atom in the universe. If this entity existed, it could predict the future perfectly, because nothing would be left to chance. Not even you. Not your questions. Not your doubts. Not the feeling in your chest right now that whispers, "No. I decide, don't I?" But that whisper too may be part of the machinery, just another gear turning right on schedule. Even in everyday life you may have felt it, the autopilot of habit, the momentum of moods, the strange way you do things without knowing why. Why did I say that? Why did I choose him? Why did I come here tonight? These aren't flaws in your judgment. They may be reminders that judgment itself is a reaction, not a decision. A conclusion drawn before the question was ever asked. Someone leans against a doorframe, eyes tired, voice soft. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just watching my life happen," they say. Their friend nods, not surprised. Maybe that's all any of us are doing, watching the gears turn, pretending to steer. And still, this doesn't have to be frightening. There's beauty in inevitability, like the way the moon always follows the tide, or how a lullaby always finds its end. You are here, not by accident, but by design, an unfolding equation written in breath and memory. If freedom is an illusion, perhaps it's the most generous kind, one that lets you feel seen, even if you're not steering. As your thoughts begin to slow, and the clock of your mind ticks softly into the night, consider this. The calm doesn't come from control, but from surrender. Not as defeat, but as peace. A leaf doesn't resent the wind, it just follows. And as we drift further inward, we'll leave behind the ticking altogether and explore a stranger question. What if we aren't mechanical at all, but digital? What if this reality is only pretending to be real? The simulation hypothesis. You're lying in bed, the screen's soft glow gently flickering, and a question begins to whisper beneath your thoughts. What if none of this is real? Not the bed, not the walls, not the choices you've made today. What if everything, the regret over a word left unsaid, the memory of a childhood pet, even the rhythm of your breath, is just data, rendered in real time by something beyond comprehension? Are you saying I'm fake? One voice murmurs. No, the other replies calmly, like someone who has long accepted uncertainty. I'm saying you might be programmed. The simulation hypothesis doesn't ask if we're dreaming. It asks if we're running. Brought into modern thought by philosopher Nick Bostrom, it proposes this. If any advanced civilization has the technological capability to simulate a world, and they have interest in doing so, then the number of simulated realities could vastly outnumber real ones. And if that's the case, statistically speaking, you and I, we're more likely to be digital echoes than organic originals. The implications unravel quietly, like a silk thread slipping through fingers. Every decision you thought you made, the job you took, the relationship you left, the moment you paused this video and came back, might not have been yours at all. It might have been scripted. Every thought could be a subroutine, every emotion, a pre-coded response. But I feel real, the first voice insists. That has to count for something. Does it? The second one says gently. A character in a dream can feel real too, but that doesn't make the dream theirs. Free will in this context becomes a design feature, like the illusion of depth in a video game sky, convincing, necessary, but hollow. The choice between tea or coffee, staying or leaving, loving or withholding. It's possible all of it was just code executing beautifully, convincingly. So then, if someone wrote your script, can you rewrite it? Or are you a story told by a cosmic narrator, reciting your lines without ever knowing it? The room still feels the same, but something in your thoughts has shifted. You begin to wonder, if my will is not mine, what does that make my suffering, my joy, my hope? And yet, there's a strange comfort in the idea. If everything is code, then the sadness you carry was designed to be felt. It is not a failure. It is a feature. The second voice pauses, as if watching the stars in a sky no one programmed. And if it is just a simulation, they say, maybe dreaming about choice is the closest thing we have to freedom. Then let me keep dreaming, the first voice whispers. The screen flickers once more, and we move on. If we are code, what happens when the program includes randomness? Can chaos restore choice? Or is unpredictability just another layer of design? Let's descend a little deeper. Chaos and the coin toss. A breath held, a coin rises, and for one perfect moment, everything is suspended, possibility shimmering in midair, neither heads nor tails. Then gravity whispers, the spin slows, and the universe chooses. But did it? Chaos theory doesn't roar. It hums beneath the ordinary. It tells us that even the smallest ripple, like the warmth of your breath or the twitch of a fingertip, can shape the hurricane. It's not that the world is random, it's that it's sensitive. Sensitive in the way a spider's web trembles at the softest touch, intricate in the way 1,000 leaves shift because of one gust, wild not because it is lawless, but because its laws are delicate, and detail matters. I just thought if I left 5 minutes earlier, I wouldn't have met her, one voice murmurs. His friend replies, but if you hadn't met her, would your life have been worse or just different? Their words drift off like two leaves on different winds parting softly. The coin's fall may look like chance, but behind it is an orchestra. Air density, angle, muscle tension, friction. None of it willed, all of it real. So when we speak of randomness, we don't speak of freedom. We speak of noise, the kind that drowns out any clear signal, like static between stations on a night drive. You do not decide how the coin lands, nor does the coin. It flips, it falls, and we call that a decision. Perhaps your choices are the same, tossed by forces just as subtle, just as silent. In a soft-lit diner booth, a woman stirs her coffee. Do you ever feel like the world decides before you do? She asks the man across from her. He looks at the steam curling from her cup. All the time, he says. But I still say yes or no, even if I don't know why. That's the paradox, isn't it? Randomness feels like wiggle room, but it's not the same as free will. It's not you dancing. It's the floor tilting. Not agency, but accident. And still, there is beauty in unpredictability, in not knowing, in the way the stars scatter differently every time we look up. There's comfort too, because if we are tossed by chaos, then maybe we are not failures, just echoes of causes we never saw. So when your thoughts drift tonight, and you wonder whether you really chose your path, or simply walked it after the dust settled, know this. You are not broken for not being the author. You are a paragraph in a story too vast to hold in one hand. And still, you matter. The way each flutter matters in the weather of the world. As the coin settles, silence follows, not as an answer, but as a question. And as that quiet deepens, we step toward the ancient voices, the ones who sang of gods and threads and destinies, those who knew that fate wears many masks, some divine, some human, all familiar. Let's walk there together, eyes closed, not to find control, but to meet the ones who long ago stopped looking for it. Threads of the Fates. Close your eyes for a moment and picture a single thread glowing faintly against the darkness, delicate but unbreakable. In ancient Greece, this thread belonged to the Moirai, the three fates. Clotho spun it at birth. Lachesis measured its length. Atropos, with a final snip, ended it. A myth, perhaps, but what if it was more than a story? What if it was our earliest intuition of how life truly unfolds? Across cultures, this image repeats. Life as something woven. Hindus speak of karma. Norse tales whisper of Norns. Somehow, deep in the human psyche, there's a need to believe or suspect that we are part of something already written. Fast forward to today, and fate wears a lab coat. Genetics, epigenetics, prenatal environment, all hint that before we ever choose, something has already chosen for us. Our temperament, our risk of illness, even our preferences. So much seems decided in silence, long before we speak our first word. Do you ever feel like you were meant to be who you are? I don't know. Sometimes it feels like I'm just reacting to what's already been set in motion. Like the path was already paved. Yeah, I just walk it and call it free will. It's a strange comfort and a quiet terror. If fate is biological, if personality blooms from the soil of our childhood and not the sky of our choices, then the idea of total freedom may be another story we tell ourselves. But even if destiny wears no divine face, even if it's stitched not by gods but by DNA, it still binds us. The loom might be the human genome, the pattern set by culture and trauma, but the thread is still there, and it wraps tightly. But here's the tender mystery. Even threads fray. Even patterns unravel. People defy their upbringing. Miracles happen. Somewhere, someone pulls on the thread, and it doesn't break but bends. What do we call that? Is it rebellion? Is it awakening? Is it fate giving way to something new? As you lie back and drift into this question, let the thought settle. Perhaps you are not the thread. Perhaps you are the hand that feels it. And even if you cannot cut it, you can trace its curve. You can listen to the whisper of where it wants to go. And maybe, just maybe, you can change how it feels to follow it. And so we ask, if you tug gently at the illusion of decision, what unravels next? The paradox of choice. You step into a quiet aisle under soft fluorescent lights. Shelves rise like glass mountains, each box a little flag of freedom. 37 types of cereal, all promising happiness, all smiling with color. Yet somehow, you stand still. A pause not of laziness, but wait. A peculiar kind of silence blooms, not in the store, but in your chest. The weight of picking, the fear of picking wrong. Do you ever just walk out with nothing? She asked it softly, fingers grazing a box before changing her mind. Sometimes, he answered, it's easier to want everything than to pick one thing. They laughed, but not out of joy, more like mutual surrender. Barry Schwartz, a name you might not know, once pointed to this exact feeling. Not in a whisper, but with data. He said we believe more options mean more freedom, but the truth is quieter, more unsettling. That the explosion of choices fragments us. It doesn't lift us, it drowns us. Because every choice is a seed of doubt. Did I pick the right one? Should I have gone left instead of right? Was that outfit really me? We don't choose with our hands. We choose with memory, with fear, with childhood conditioning and ads that crawl into our psyche like ivy on an old wall. You might think you're free when picking oat milk over almond. But what if that freedom was planted in your head by someone else's whisper last week? It's strange how we crave options like a child craves candy, bright, shiny, and everywhere. And yet the more we hold, the emptier we feel. Because somewhere between shelf 1 and shelf 37, choice becomes a burden, not a gift, a performance. You reach for the cereal, not because it calls your name, but because standing still feels like failure. "I'll just pick something," you murmur. "It's not that deep." But maybe it is, because each time we choose, we write a story in our heads. This is who I am. This is what I like. And the more often we tell that story, the more trapped we become in it. The paradox of choice is that freedom to choose becomes the reason we feel trapped. What is liberty then, if too much of it feels like suffocation in slow motion? Maybe real freedom isn't in multiplying options, but in reducing noise. In stepping back and asking, not what can I choose, but why am I choosing? Whose voice is echoing behind that craving? You don't have to answer. Not now, not tonight. The mind, like the sea, calms when not stirred. So if the boxes blur, if the options feel like static, that's okay. You're not failing to choose. You're learning to hear the quiet underneath choice. And as we step away from the aisle, empty-handed but lighter, we drift into the next mystery. If our choices are echoes, then what about our thoughts? Are they truly ours? Or just reverberations in a chamber we didn't build? Let's listen gently. Echoes of influence. It begins with something so small you wouldn't notice. An unfamiliar scent drifting through a room, a single word overheard in passing, the flicker of someone else's smile or frown. These aren't just background details of our day. According to social psychologist John Bargh, they are silent architects of our decisions. In experiment after experiment, he revealed that what we do, how we act, and even how we think can be unconsciously shaped by cues so subtle, we don't even know we've been touched. Imagine walking through a hallway that smells faintly of cleaning solution. Most would assume that has nothing to do with how carefully they place their coffee cup on a table. And yet, studies show we're more likely to clean up after ourselves when exposed to such a scent. Not because we decided to be tidy, but because something ancient and invisible whispered to the deeper parts of our brain, and we obeyed. In a late-night diner, two friends sit across from each other. One of them, Mia, stirs her coffee slowly. "Do you ever wonder if you're actually making your own choices?" she asks, eyes fixed on the swirl of cream in the cup. Tom chuckles. I decided to get fries instead of a salad today. That was mine." "But was it?" she replies gently. "The ad outside showed crispy fries. You saw it when we parked." He pauses. "Maybe I just like fries. Or maybe you were nudged. You didn't think about it, you just followed." Tom leans back, thoughtful. "So what? Everything we do is just echoes of other people's influence. That's the question, isn't it? If we are subtly guided by the expressions on strangers' faces, by the weather, by the tone of a conversation overheard in the background, then what does that make our thoughts? If our opinions, preferences, and reactions are molded by forces we cannot see, perhaps we are not the sculptors of our minds, but the marble being carved by culture's invisible chisel. This idea stirs a quiet discomfort. We like to imagine ourselves as conscious agents, captains of our souls. But if these echoes shape us before awareness ever has a chance to speak, then how much of us is truly ours? Are we authors of our actions, or merely actors playing out a script written by a million invisible hands? Even rebellion, that grand gesture of individuality, might be a reaction to cues we're not even aware of. We break away, only to step into another role, equally scripted, just less obvious. As the clock ticks quietly and the night deepens, you might feel the soft weight of this thought settle over your chest, not as fear, but as wonder. If you are made of echoes, then whose voices do you carry? Your parents? Your teachers? A song from childhood? A slogan on a billboard? Does your laughter have someone else's rhythm beneath it? And if so, could you learn to listen more carefully, to hear the echo before it becomes the decision? Close your eyes and notice the air, the sounds, the colors behind your eyelids. What is nudging you right now, ever so gently? As that thought fades into the background, we move toward something even stranger, where the influence is no longer just unconscious, where others begin to control our choices directly, and we don't even notice. The puppet of suggestion. You're standing in line at a quiet cafe. The hum of voices around you is soft, distant. Someone behind you gently taps your shoulder and says with a calm, smiling voice, "You don't mind letting me go first, right? I've only got one item." And somehow, before your logic can check in, your body moves aside. You nod. You smile back. But as they walk past, a tiny part of you wonders, did I really decide that? Suggestion doesn't wear a mask of force. It slips in through the cracks of politeness, through the way someone leans in slightly, lowers their voice, or repeats just enough to feel like your own thought. It's a whisper that settles into your choices before you've even called them choices. Psychologists studying hypnosis have shown just how pliable the mind can be. In one well-known experiment, participants were told they couldn't move their arm, and they didn't. Not because the body was bound, but because the idea was planted. Another was convinced they couldn't read a simple word on a page, not through blindness, but belief. A thought, softly spoken, rewired perception. No locks, no restraints, just a story, told convincingly enough. So you're saying we can be made to believe we're not ourselves? Not quite. More like, we can be made to believe things that shape who we think we are. It's unsettling, in a tender sort of way. Like discovering the words you've always spoken might not have been yours. That some of the yeses you've given in life, at parties you didn't want to go to, relationships you drifted into, jobs you stayed too long at, were never born fully in your will, but in someone else's gentle framing. The script was offered. You just read the line. And this doesn't always feel like manipulation. Sometimes it feels like kindness. Come on, you'd be great at this. Or care. Don't worry, just trust me. And because we want to connect, because humans are social creatures built not to be isolated, but to be seen, heard, and understood, we comply, not out of fear, but from suggestion, the velvet rope of social harmony. In that compliance, we mistake motion for agency. But if a word can paralyze, or persuade, or pivot our path, then what is the shape of free will? Perhaps it is more like a river than a road, flowing in a direction we do not choose, with only small choices about which rock to touch along the way. And that brings us quietly to a deeper place, a place not of blame, but of curiosity. So, was it really me who said yes all those times? Maybe, but maybe it was the part of you that just wanted peace more than power. The room softens as you breathe in. No judgment, just reflection. The realization that autonomy may not be a switch we flip, but a fog we move through, sometimes clear, sometimes thick, always shifting with the currents of others. And now we drift toward the next layer of the mind. If suggestion can bend our will, what happens when memory, the very thing we use to define ourselves, begins to betray us too? What if the compass we thought we trusted is quietly spinning under someone else's influence? Let's turn the page. The next whisper is not in your choices, but in your recollections. The Memory Mirage. You close your eyes and drift toward a memory, a birthday maybe. The way the cake looked, the sound of laughter, the warmth of candlelight on your face. It feels real, detailed, rooted in who you are. But what if none of it happened that way? What if the cake was chocolate, not vanilla? Or the laughter you hear is borrowed from someone else's story, stitched into yours by suggestion, repetition, or imagination? Cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus spent decades unraveling this mystery. Her experiments revealed something quietly unnerving. The brain is not a recorder. It's a storyteller, a sculptor of memory. Given the right cues, people can recall entire events that never happened. They'll defend them, cry over them, even swear to their truth. A lost vacation, a childhood trauma, a smile that never was. The mind doesn't just store memories, it rewrites them. Every act of remembering is also an act of editing. Two friends lie in bed, the glow of streetlights tracing slow lines across the ceiling. "You remember when we got caught in that rainstorm?" One asks softly. "I thought that was your sister, not me." "No, it was you. We ran, soaked. You dropped your phone in the puddle." A pause. A frown. "Maybe you're right. Funny. I can almost feel the rain now." That almost is the miracle and the danger. If memories are so easy to sculpt, are we sculptors of our own identity? Or are we simply inheriting revisions, each recall an echo of a fiction we believe to be truth? This shakes the foundation of free will. After all, the choices we make today are shaped by the stories we tell ourselves about who we've been. We avoid pain, pursue dreams, love, or fear, all based on memories. But if those memories can be wrong, altered, or even implanted by a well-meaning friend, a news story, or a dream, then who is the author of our choices? You sit across from someone and argue over what was said, what was done. You both remember differently. Which of you is right? Maybe neither. Maybe memory is less a window to the past and more like a fogged mirror, showing just enough to convince you, but never enough to trust. And yet, in that fragility, there's something deeply human. Memory's imperfection is not just a flaw, it's the soil in which compassion grows. We forgive because we forget. We change because we misremember. And sometimes, we heal because we rewrite the pain. Still, the question lingers like breath on glass. If our past is a mirage, shifting with every glance, then what part of us is truly free? Can you choose your path if you can't even trust where you've come from? Let us now step deeper, past memory, past narrative, into the silent space before any story begins, into the womb where choice has not yet bloomed, but perhaps fate already whispers. The womb and the blueprint. There's a kind of hush beneath the heartbeat, a world where sound is muffled, light is distant, and everything is fluid, literally and figuratively. Before thought, before language, before even breath, we existed. But we were not untouched. Science once believed the womb was a safe house, sealed, neutral, blank. But epigenetics whispers otherwise. It tells us that before you opened your eyes to the world had already begun to write in you, not with ink, but with hormones, nutrients, and chemical signals. If your mother felt fear, you flinched. If she lacked warmth, your cells responded. If she sang, perhaps your bones remember. It's not fantasy, it's data. Tiny molecules dancing across DNA, flipping switches that determine not just what grows, but how you might act, react, even love. And all of this before your name was ever spoken. Do you think that means we didn't choose to be the way we are? The man asking had a paper coffee cup, mostly empty. The woman beside him was quiet for a breath, then replied, "Maybe we're not choosing who we are, but we're always choosing who we become, even if we don't notice the choosing." There's something hauntingly tender in the idea that your first instructions were written without consent, that before you formed a single conscious memory, a blueprint of emotional responses had already been sketched. The stress that startles you too quickly, the ease with which you trust or don't, the calm you feel near music, or the fear when touched unexpectedly. And if those patterns were etched before you could resist them, are you free? Or are you following a script, not from childhood, but from the silence before you were born? Some say we are clay shaped by biology. Others say we are fire sparked by soul. But perhaps we are both, formed and forming, shaped and shaping, in a feedback loop that starts in the dark water of the womb. A child not yet born might already carry the echo of war, the rhythm of love, the ache of hunger passed down through blood and breath. The blueprint is not destiny, but it is direction. You are not at fault for the winds that shaped your sail, but you are still the one who steers. And maybe, just maybe, the awareness of that wind is the first act of free will. So as you breathe now, deeply and softly, let this truth settle like mist across your mind. Your beginning was not your choice, but your becoming might still be. And now, let us drift forward into the realm of words, the codes we speak, the thoughts they sculpt, and how language itself might hold the keys to our perception. The prison of language. There's a quiet trap we all live inside, but rarely see. Not one of walls or wires, but of words. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis whispers this unsettling idea that language does not merely reflect what we think, it shapes what we can think. Each sentence you speak, each name you give to a feeling or a thought, isn't just describing your world, it's building it. Now imagine this. In a small Amazonian tribe, there are no words for numbers. Not even 1, 2, or 3. They don't count. They estimate, gesture, guess. To us, it may feel like a deficit, but for them, it's just life. Or take cultures where there's no future tense. No, I will go. Everything is lived in the now, or described vaguely, without sharp lines between today and tomorrow. Could such a language protect them from the anxiety of the unknown? Or does it steal from them the freedom to plan? Hey, do you ever feel like you want something but don't even know what it is? Yeah, she says, staring at the ceiling, like a wordless ache in your chest. And because you can't name it, it just stays there. Maybe that's it, he replies. Maybe we're all trapped by the words we were taught to use. Maybe the ones we never learned are holding our choices hostage. Words give form to dreams. But what of the dreams that remain unspeakable? What happens to the girl who was never taught the word freedom? The boy who never learned the word boundaries? If you've never named a desire, have you truly denied it? Or has it simply been denied to you, like a locked room in your own mind? Even in modern life, you may feel this strange confinement. There are days when a feeling swells within you, trying to be understood, but the words fail. And without the words, it lingers shapeless. That's not just a moment of confusion. It's a loss of choice. A thought that could not grow into an action because it had no name to ride on. So perhaps free will is not only limited by genetics or circumstance, but by lexicon, by the vocabulary passed to us from our culture, our upbringing, our past. We cannot will what we cannot speak, and what we cannot speak, we may never even imagine. As your eyes grow heavy and your thoughts grow quiet, consider this. Could your next great insight, the freedom you crave, be waiting just beyond the edge of your language? Not unreachable, just unspoken. And so we pause here, on the edge of silence, where words end, but the mind continues. Let's now drift into that stillness and ask, is the mind ever truly alone, or does it simply speak in ways we no longer understand? The chorus in your head. There's a moment, quiet and in between things, where the world dims and you finally hear it. Not noise, not silence, but a subtle thread, a voice. Maybe it sounds like you, maybe it doesn't. Maybe it switches mid-thought or whispers in borrowed tones. But it's there. And tonight we ask, is that voice ever truly yours? Developmental psychologists tell us that your internal monologue, the soft current of narration that runs through your day, isn't born but built, shaped slowly, like clay passed from one hand to the next. Parents first, then teachers, a friend who once said, "You're always late," a lover who murmured, "You make me feel safe." These phrases settle in, not just as memories, but as scripts, and over time, you begin to speak them to yourself. In a small kitchen, a woman stirs tea as her partner leans on the doorway. You ever catch yourself saying something and realizing it's your mom's voice? He asks. She smiles, nods, then adds softly, "Worse, I argue with her, in my head, every morning." It's easy to believe that thinking is private, that our thoughts are ours and ours alone, but language is a hand-me-down, and thoughts, it turns out, wear old clothes. What feels like self-talk may be nothing more than rehearsals of past conversations, like ghosts at a dinner table you never realized you were still hosting. This doesn't mean you aren't real. It doesn't mean you aren't aware. But it does blur the origin. If your inner critic was trained by a coach from 3rd grade, or your self-doubt speaks in the rhythm of a parent's disappointment, how much of your free will is a duet you never meant to sing? A young man sits by a window, eyes glazed at the passing lights. "I don't even know why I said no," he says to no one. It just felt automatic, like the decision had been made a long time ago. That's the thing about the chorus. It doesn't shout. It hums, a harmony of approval and rejection, memory and mimicry, buried deep beneath your daily choices. So when you pick the blue shirt instead of the red one, or you decline the call from someone who hurt you, are you really deciding? Or are you obeying a quiet song written long before you knew you were listening? The science doesn't accuse. It invites you to soften, to listen, and maybe, just maybe, to rewrite. Because even if your thoughts began as echoes, they don't have to stay that way. Still, this realization, gentle though it may be, unearths a deeper question. If our decisions are shaped by voices long past, can we ever hear ourselves clearly? Before you drift further into rest, let that question hang like smoke in a still room. The next breath may bring it closer, or carry it away. Now, as this chorus fades, let us step deeper into the body itself, where the chemical tides of the brain may be pulling you toward choices you never truly chose. Let's listen in, not with judgment, but with wonder. Dopamine's deal. It begins quietly, like a whisper beneath your wants. You see a glowing screen, smell fresh bread, hear a ping, feel a pull. Not a command, not a voice, just a leaning, a tendency, a soft gravitational nudge, like your thoughts were leaning in a direction before you even noticed. That is dopamine. Not pleasure itself, as many misunderstand it, but the chemical compass of your desire. It doesn't wait until you're happy to react. It fires when you predict you're about to be. It's not the taste of chocolate that sends the surge. It's the sight of the wrapper, the memory, the hint. Dopamine isn't the joy. It's the promise of joy. I didn't mean to scroll this long, someone says. You kind of did, though, the other replies gently. Or at least, your brain did. There's a pause, a shrug, a smile that hides a question neither wants to ask out loud. The truth is, dopamine teaches your brain what to want long before you're aware of it. It watches, it records, it shapes a map of reward, of little pleasures paired with patterns. Open this app and you might see a like. Light a cigarette and the world softens for 5 seconds. The cycle repeats, not by choice, but by chemistry. And it's subtle. A loop doesn't shout. It hums. You follow it not because you're weak, but because you're wired. Each loop is a tiny deal you never remember signing. The signature, a spike in your dopamine pathway. The contract, a craving that returns like clockwork, triggered not by logic but by context. A time, a place, a smell. So wait, the first person says, rubbing their forehead. You're saying I don't really want the thing? No, the second replies. I'm saying the wanting might have been programmed before you knew what wanting was. We like to believe our choices rise from freedom, out of reason, reflection, and character. But what if they come from reinforcement, from the chemical footprints left behind by yesterday's pleasures and habits? Is a choice still a choice if your mind is already leaning toward the path of least dopamine resistance? And then the deeper question comes in, soft but heavy. If your urges are shaped not by who you are, but by what's been rewarded, are you living or just predicting? That's the deal dopamine offers. It won't punish you. It will guide you, shape you, trick you with a spark of anticipation. It will draw the blueprint of your behavior beneath your awareness, and you'll call it desire. But will you call it choice? Perhaps freedom isn't lost in pain, but in pleasure, not in resistance, but in routine. And if that's the case, let us now step beyond neurotransmitters, past the circuits and the sparks. Let's ask something stranger still. If the brain can be split, divided clean in half, can the mind? The split brain paradox. A soft flicker behind the eyes, a twitch in the left hand, and then the right hand quietly reaches over to undo what the left just did. Not out of protest, not in defiance, but as if it were obeying a completely different command. This isn't fiction. It's the quiet chaos of the split brain. In certain rare patients, the bridge between the brain's hemispheres, the corpus callosum, is surgically cut to reduce seizures. And when it is, something strange happens. The left brain, which houses language, continues talking as if nothing has changed. It explains. It rationalizes. It stitches meaning like a tailor who doesn't realize the fabric was cut in half. Meanwhile, the right brain, silent, wordless, acts on impulses the other side cannot explain. One day, a man smiles at you with one half of his face. The other half stays still. And you wonder, not what's wrong with him, but what's happening behind the curtain, behind your own curtain. Could it be that what you call I is already plural? Two friends sit across a table. One holds up a fork with their left hand, then pauses, switching it to the right. Did you mean to do that? They shrug. I guess so. But neither of them looks convinced, and that's the heart of the paradox. In tests, a split brain patient might draw a snow scene with the left hand and a chicken with the right, then say the chicken was to clean the coop. The logic is false, but the belief is real. The interpreter, half of the brain, must explain what it can't understand. It doesn't say, "I don't know." It says, "This must be the reason," and it believes itself. So what happens when we do the same? When we justify a decision we didn't truly make? Maybe you walked into a room and started a conversation you hadn't planned, or forgave someone faster than you expected. You called it grace. You called it growth. But what if it was another part of you, one without language, pulling the strings? A soft voice in your chest says, "You did that because you're a good person," and you want to believe it. But something deeper stirs, a feeling not quite yours, yet somehow familiar. A stranger holds a door open and says, "Seems like it's your turn," and you smile, unsure if they meant the door or the decision waiting behind it. It's tempting to picture ourselves as a single captain steering the ship, but what if we are the crew, whispering commands in the dark, some rowing left, some rowing right, some dreaming of the stars while others fear the shore? Unity is a performance, not a certainty. Still, the illusion holds. We button the shirt, unaware another hand unbuttons it a moment later. We chalk it up to indecision, habit, mood. But maybe it's more than that. Maybe free will is the story told by the side that gets to speak, and the rest, silent, unseen, just keeps rowing. So as you begin to sink into the softness of your bed, let that question unfold without urgency. If two minds can live in one skull, what does that make us? Not kings, perhaps, but a council, a symphony, a dreamt committee, rehearsing the lines of a single soul. Let your thoughts drift gently now from the split halves of the brain to something stranger still. Whether time itself gives us any room to choose or simply sweeps us forward like a leaf in its river. The illusion of now. Close your eyes for a moment and try to touch the present. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, just now. But here's the catch. The now you think you feel. It's already over. Neuroscientists have shown that your brain takes time, about 80 milliseconds, to process sensory input, which means by the time you're aware of a sound, a light, or even your own breath, that moment has already passed. You are not living in the present. You are living in a memory of it. It's like watching stars twinkle in the night sky, beautiful, eternal, but dead. Their light takes years to reach us. What we see is their echo, and maybe our thoughts, our experiences, our decisions are all starlight, soft illusions from just a fraction of a second ago. A quiet conversation unfolds in a dark room. Did you feel that breeze just now? Yeah, I think so. Wait, did I really? Or am I just remembering it? Does it matter? It might. If I reacted to it too late, maybe it wasn't a choice, just a replay. And that's the haunting part. If every sensation arrives just a little too late, if every flicker of awareness is just a snapshot from the past, what happens to free will? How can you truly choose in a moment that's already evaporated? Consider this. When you decide to move your hand, brain scans show the neural activity preparing that action before you consciously decide to do it. It's like your body whispers the decision first, and your mind rushes in to take credit. The will comes after the motion. The reflection follows the ripple. So if now is always slightly behind reality, if your choices are built on expired moments, are you truly steering the ship, or just narrating the journey from the back of the boat? Another voice joins the stillness. Maybe free will is just the illusion we build to feel in control, like pretending you're the conductor of a train that's already running on tracks laid long ago. But that illusion, it comforts us. Yes, and maybe that's all it was ever meant to do. You exist in a constant delay, a consciousness that lags behind the rhythm of reality, like watching the world through a window smeared with time. Every decision is a guess, an echo, a ripple of what just was. And yet, even in the illusion, there's a kind of beauty, like dancing to music that has already stopped, but still hearing it in your mind. Now let us drift from these elusive moments into something seemingly more concrete. If you can't even grasp the present, what about the future? Can your path be written in numbers, predicted like a weather report? Let's open that door next. Predictive minds and patterned lives. You were never alone in the room. Even when it was quiet, even when it was just you and the screen, something was watching. Not with eyes, but with patterns. You scrolled and it learned. You hesitated and it remembered. Each moment of curiosity, each skip, each tap left a trace. And now, it doesn't just reflect you, it predicts you. A gentle voice might say, "Funny how it always recommends what I didn't know I wanted." But perhaps it did know. Better than you. Before you even wanted it. These systems don't guess. They calculate. Billions of clicks fed into invisible architectures, creating digital doppelgangers that move just like you. Not the person you think you are, but the one you consistently become. When you're tired, when you're rushed, when you're pretending not to care. One friend turns to another at a cafe, both cradling their cups. You ever notice how it finishes your search before you do? The other smirks. Feels like I'm not typing. I'm being typed. It's soft, harmless even. Until you ask, who gets to be the author of your choices? Because when you're predicted, you're preceded. And in a world where action is guessed before it's made, does the act still belong to you? When an algorithm nudges you to watch this instead of that, or to buy now, not later, is your will choosing, or is it being chosen? Somewhere beneath the surface, there's a database so vast that it speaks the language of your behavior fluently. It doesn't need your name, it needs your rhythm. And that rhythm, so beautifully yours, can now be used to choreograph your next 10 steps. What once felt like a future full of possibilities now unfolds like a hallway of automatic doors, each one opening a split second before you arrive. Effortless, familiar, but predetermined. And what does that make you? Not a puppet, not quite a ghost, but something in between, a wandering story inside a machine that's already written your next line. There's no judgment in that thought, only curiosity, and maybe a gentle question, asked like a whisper through a half-cracked door. If they can guess your choices before you make them, is your freedom hiding, or was it never truly there? The cafe grows quieter now. The voices fade into the clinking of spoons. The questions linger like steam from a mug. Let them. If your mind drifts now, let it. You can always come back later. Because next, we look not forward, but backward, beyond the screen, beyond the code, into the blood and bone of lineage. What if the hands shaping your choices didn't come from machines, but from the silent voices of your ancestors? Close your eyes. We'll go there soon. Ancestors echo. There are moments, quiet and sudden, when you find yourself drawn to something without knowing why. A scent that tugs at your chest, a fear that comes with no name, a longing for places you've never been. Beneath these subtle ripples of emotion, modern science whispers a theory that feels almost spiritual. You are not just your own story. Through the lens of epigenetics, researchers have discovered that the traumas, addictions, and coping mechanisms of your ancestors might still live in you, not metaphorically, but in the fine-tuned instructions of your genes. like verses in a lullaby passed down through blood rather than voice. Why do I always panic in tight spaces? Someone might ask, resting their forehead against the cool tile of a bathroom wall. Nothing ever happened to me. Not really. And perhaps it's true. Perhaps the fear was never yours. Perhaps it began decades ago in a ship's cargo hold, or a war bunker, or a locked attic where silence was survival. These emotional codes, pressed into DNA like fingerprints into clay, don't vanish with time. They echo. A couple sits on their porch under a low sky, sharing tea. You ever get the feeling, she says, that you're trying to heal something, but you don't know what? He nods slowly. Yeah, like you're finishing a sentence someone else started. It is not superstition. It's not mysticism. It's data. In mice, stress endured by the parents has altered fear responses in pups who've never experienced the original trigger. In humans, the descendants of Holocaust survivors show differences in stress hormone regulation. The children of famine survivors have distinct metabolic changes. Somehow, the body remembers. So what happens to free will when part of your behavior, your appetite, your anxieties, even your dreams aren't chosen but inherited? If your urges and resistances are echoes of someone else's life, how free is your choice? You may think you're deciding between cake and kale, courage and retreat, love and solitude. But what if those options are already tilted by ancestral fingerprints, quietly nudging your hand before you even reach? A man walks into a room and senses something wrong, not because of experience, not because of logic, but because, generations ago, his great-grandmother survived that very same silence in that very same kind of room. And now his body, without consulting his mind, stiffens. These echoes do not doom us, they do not make us prisoners, but they do shape the rooms we walk through. And until we name them, feel them, and gently ask where they came from, we may be living a song without knowing the words, or even who wrote the first line. So the question lingers like a note hanging in the dark. Are we truly choosing? Or are we harmonizing with ghosts? Now let your mind drift from the personal to the collective. Let's shift from the inherited scars of a single soul to the broader pattern of societies. Because if individuals carry echoes, can a whole culture sing in its own voice or only replay the chorus of history? The collective illusion. You're walking through a familiar hallway, perhaps in school or a government building. The paint is chipped. The floor hums under the flicker of old fluorescent lights. People around you slow down, look to the left. Without question, you follow. You don't know why. But your legs obey the silent vote of the crowd. And just like that, a choice is made. There's a rhythm to culture that moves us like music we didn't pick. Traditions, symbols, daily rituals, all swirling around us like perfume in the air. You breathe it in without noticing. And soon, it's hard to tell what was yours to begin with. Solomon Asch once showed us a chilling truth. A person will say a line is longer, even when it's clearly shorter, just because others around them say so. Not because they believe it, but because standing alone in truth feels colder than sitting in a lie with everyone else. It's a warm night in a small town square. Two friends sit on a bench. One picks at the sleeve of his jacket and says, "You ever wonder if you really believe what you say? Or if it's just easier?" The other smiles with tired eyes. "I used to think I had strong opinions. Turns out I just hated being the odd one out." Sometimes it's not what you think. It's what you think you should think. The illusion doesn't come from one person lying, but from 100 people nodding at the same time. Consensus can be a comfort. It can also be a cage When a culture claps, you clap. When it mourns, you mourn. When it decides something is sacred or scandalous, your heart often follows without being consulted. You wake up in the middle of a belief, and it takes years to realize it was never yours. Like a leaf on a river, it's hard to say you chose the direction when the current has been flowing since before you were born. The language you speak, the values you inherit, the dreams you're told are noble. They all whisper to you long before you whisper back. But even tides can carry contradictions. One evening, you might join a protest. Another, you might scroll past a tragedy and feel nothing. Was that apathy or permission silently granted by your social world? Culture isn't just the stories we hear. It's the ones we're too afraid to question, not because we're weak, but because belonging matters. And exclusion? That's a wound our ancestors bled from. A voice in the crowd shouts something bold, and suddenly you find yourself nodding, not because it feels true, but because it feels safe, or popular, or simply inevitable. And yet, you tell yourself, I decided. But maybe decision is more like catching a scent in the wind, something familiar, something shared, and before you know it, you're walking that hallway again, turning left, just like everyone else. Let your breath soften now. If you've ever felt like your choices echoed something larger, something unspoken, you're not alone. It's not weakness to be shaped. It's human. As the tide recedes for a moment, we ask, if groups move as one, what about the self? What happens when your brain reaches its limit, standing at the edge of a choice too large to fully grasp? Let's step gently into that question, together. The cognitive bottleneck. You sit in a cafe, sipping your coffee, scrolling your phone, half listening to the music, vaguely aware of the people talking behind you. You think you're present, you feel in control, but in truth, you're standing in a hallway of mirrors, catching only flashes of what's really around you, while your brain decides what you should notice and what you must ignore. Did you see that guy at the counter drop his wallet? No, I was watching the news clip on my phone. Exactly. It happened right next to you. That's the bottleneck. The mind, for all its magnificence, isn't a spotlight. It's a narrow flashlight in a pitch-black warehouse. At any given moment, your conscious awareness can only juggle about 4 things at once. Beyond that, your brain starts outsourcing. It leans on assumptions, past experiences, and mental shortcuts. Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman called this System 1 thinking, fast, intuitive, and instinctive. The mind uses it to survive, to make split-second decisions, but it often gets things wrong. And worst of all, you rarely notice. You see a stranger's face and think, I don't trust him. You don't know why. Maybe he resembles someone who once hurt you. Maybe your mind filtered his posture, his tone, the weather, and assigned him a subconscious label. By the time your conscious brain catches up, the decision is made, and you just rationalize it after the fact. So you're saying, most of my choices were made before I even thought them? Exactly. Like a magician palming the coin before you see the trick. This raises an unsettling question. Can you truly choose if the information you're choosing from is filtered and incomplete? Like trying to solve a puzzle with missing pieces, you might reach an answer, but is it truly yours? Or just the best guess your brain could stitch together in time? There's a kind of humility in this realization, not to make you feel helpless, but to soften the illusion of total command. Perhaps free will isn't about being omniscient, but about being aware of your blind spots. Maybe it's not about being the driver, but but about knowing when you're drifting. And here's the paradox. The more we believe we see everything clearly, the more we become prisoners of the unseen. The bottleneck doesn't just limit your view, it shapes your entire sense of freedom. So the next time you make a choice, pause. Ask yourself, not just what you're deciding, but why you're so sure. Trace the thread backward. Was it reason or routine? Now let us leave this dim hallway of perception. Let's turn inward again, not to the brain's machinery, but to the unknown void it tries to protect us from. Uncertainty. What happens when every choice is only a desperate attempt to flee from the unknown rather than embrace it? Let's explore that softly. The fear of the unknown. Sometimes the smallest decisions feel like the safest ones, the left turn instead of the right, the delayed message that never gets sent, the job you didn't apply for, not because you didn't want it, but because you didn't want to be rejected. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, something deeper stirs. Not desire, but defense. Not pursuit, but protection. Behavioral economists call it loss aversion, the mind's deep tendency to fear losing more than it delights in gaining. It's not about ambition, it's about shielding the self. Our decisions aren't always arrows shot toward desire. Sometimes, they're just umbrellas opened in the rain. Two friends in a coffee shop, voices low under soft jazz. One asks, "So, why didn't you take that offer?" The other swirls their cup slowly. "I don't know. Something felt off. Like, what if I left and it didn't work out?" There's no real enemy in that story, only the echo of risk. And maybe that's the more powerful antagonist, the unknown that never quite names itself, but still shapes everything. Most of the time, we don't choose what we want. We choose what won't hurt us. We avoid pain, even imaginary ones, with a kind of graceful instinct. A friend's party missed because you had a headache. A call not returned because you were swamped. We dress fear in the language of reason and carry on. But what if that's not reason at all? What if that's just choreography, an intricate dance to avoid discomfort? Then what we call free may not be freedom, but an elegant retreat. A compass doesn't spin in fear, but our decisions do. And what happens when that compass quietly hands control to the map of fear? You stay in the relationship. You avoid the risk. You say no to what excites you, because it also unnerves you, and you call it wisdom. Still, there's no shame here. The mind isn't broken. It's protective. Its job is to keep us safe, even if it keeps us small. But in that tenderness lies the question, are we living with our hands on the wheel, or just reacting to where the road might go wrong? Outside a bookstore, someone stands hesitating at the door. The lights are on, the air inside is warm, but something keeps them outside a moment longer. Not rejection, not doubt, just that subtle, ancient whisper of risk. And eventually, maybe they walk in, or maybe they don't. Either way, it wasn't desire that made the call. It was fear's gentle grip on the steering wheel, soft enough not to alarm you, firm enough to decide. Let's rest here for a moment. If sleep finds you, that's okay. This idea will still be waiting when you return, and when you do, we'll drift into a new question. If fear isn't the only puppeteer, could it be your body, those secret biological signals beneath your thoughts that moves your hand before you think? Let's go there next. The gut decision. There's a moment, subtle yet familiar, when we say, "I just have a gut feeling." That quiet whisper deep in your abdomen isn't just metaphor. It might be your second brain speaking. Within the folds of your intestines lives the enteric nervous system, a complex web of over 100 million neurons more than in your spinal cord. Scientists call it the second brain, and it's not just a nickname. This network doesn't merely help with digestion, it sends and receives signals that affect mood, emotion, and decision-making. Your stomach isn't just digesting food, it's digesting experience, and perhaps feeding your will. Two roommates sit on a bench, watching the late afternoon sun. One speaks quietly. Ever get that feeling something's off, even when everything looks fine? Like when your stomach knots up, and you can't explain why? Exactly. It's like my gut knows before my brain does. And maybe it does. Because the second brain communicates constantly with the one in your skull via the vagus nerve, transmitting a stream of data shaped not just by neurons, but by something even smaller, microbes. Yes, your gut microbiome, a bustling microscopic metropolis of trillions of bacteria, might be influencing what you crave, how you react to stress, even the risks you take. Some strains are linked to higher anxiety, others to calm. Some send signals to seek sugar, others to resist it. This isn't science fiction. It's behavioral biology. So ask yourself, when you make a decision, what to eat, whom to trust, when to leap, how much of that choice is truly yours? Or is it co-authored by a committee of microorganisms you cannot see? Think about the time you snapped at someone when you were hungry, or when your mood lifted after a good meal, or when you avoided a situation simply because your stomach turned. These aren't just quirks, they're glimpses into an invisible influence, one rooted deep in your core. If your inner world is partly run by a microbial civilization with its own rhythms and desires, then maybe free will isn't a solo act. Maybe it's a negotiation, a quiet tug-of-war between you and them. And what does that mean for responsibility? For autonomy? Can we still say we chose with full freedom when our biology is whispering behind the curtain? As the breeze shifts, one of the roommates stares off and murmurs, "So when I followed my gut, maybe I followed 1,000 tiny voices inside me?" The other grins. Maybe, but hey, at least they're on your side, right? Let's now leave the gut and its hidden parliament behind and drift toward an even stranger frontier, one where nothing is fixed, outcomes flicker in shadows, and uncertainty itself becomes law. Welcome to the quantum mind. Quantum indeterminacy. Somewhere between silence and sleep, a question floats up, so light you barely notice it. If everything is random, does that make us free? Quantum physics whispers stories stranger than fiction. Beneath the world of solid things and definite choices, there lives a dance of probabilities, particles that don't settle until someone looks. Before the gaze, they hover in possibility. After, they collapse, not from will, from interaction. It's tempting to believe that within that unpredictability lies a doorway to freedom, that if the universe itself refuses to obey a fixed script, perhaps so can we. But randomness is not freedom, and a coin tossed by the wind does not choose its landing. Still, it feels freeing, doesn't it? The idea that beneath the gears of causality, something slips, something wriggles loose. Maybe that's all we need to believe there's space, however narrow, for choice to flicker. In a dimly lit cafe, two friends talk late into the night. One leans forward, coffee warm between their palms. "If my future isn't fixed," they say softly, "doesn't that mean I can make it up as I go?" The other tilts their head, watching steam curl into nothing. "Maybe," they reply. "Or maybe you're just a leaf dancing in a storm that doesn't know where it's going either." The thought is neither cold nor cruel. It's just honest. The storm doesn't need a purpose. The particles don't need meaning. And yet, here we are, humans who do. So we spin stories, because stories make patterns, and patterns soothe the trembling edge of chaos. But when we claim those patterns as will, are we making a map or mistaking it for the road? You see, randomness can be comforting, like rain tapping gently on a window while you drift off. It's unpredictable, but not intentional. There's no malice, no plan, just noise that feels almost like music when you stop trying to make sense of it. And maybe that's the quiet lesson. Not all uncertainty is threat. Some of it is just life breathing in places we can't predict. Beneath the quantum veil, we find not a soul waiting to be set free, but a roulette wheel spinning in silence, indifferent to the bet. As your eyes grow heavier, let this idea settle. Not everything needs meaning to be beautiful. Not every unchained chain needs to be held. And now, as we glide gently away from particles flickering in and out of being, let's drift toward something even closer to home. The programs behind your habits, the code beneath your choices. Let's ask, what if your freedom is just a user interface, while the real decisions happen below the screen? The interface illusion. You press the button and the light turns on. You swipe the screen and music begins. The world responds, almost lovingly, to your fingertips. And for a moment, it feels like you are the one in charge, the conductor, the architect. But beneath that soft glow of control lies a quiet truth. You're not in command. You're interacting with a system designed to make you feel like you are. A voice murmurs from the other side of the booth. Did you ever notice how most elevators have a close door button? That doesn't work. The other person chuckles. Yeah, I still press it though. Feels faster, even if it's not. That's the interface illusion. A beautiful lie dressed up as choice. In computing, interfaces are the polished surfaces that let users pretend they're controlling complex systems. Click here, drag there. And while you move a mouse or tap a screen, an invisible orchestra of code hums beneath, deciding, filtering, executing rules you never see. Some cognitive scientists believe our consciousness might work the same way, that what you call a decision is just your mind's interface, a clean, intuitive display shielding you from the storm of unconscious processing happening behind it. You never see the variables, the biases, the emotional weightings. You just see the button and the feeling of having pressed it. She leans back, eyes half closed. So maybe we're just narrating the story after it's already written? He stirs his tea gently. Or maybe we're just watching the cursor move, thinking we're the hand. You stand at a crossroads, but the map you're holding may be decorative. Choices feel real because they appear orderly. But what if they're more like ripples in a stream, surfacing from depths we can't see? And if you're only ever seeing the output, not the source, how much credit can you take for what you do? Still, there's a comfort in this illusion, like automatic doors that open when you walk toward them. You don't know how or why, but they respond, and you smile, believing it was your stride. You lean against the wall, eyelids softening. You're not resisting sleep now, just flowing with it, a kind of surrender that feels like freedom. So if your life is partly interface, partly code, maybe that's okay. Maybe it's not about control, but about trust. Maybe your conscious mind isn't a driver, but a lantern, illuminating the path, not paving it. In the end, even lanterns flicker. And even now, the deeper systems within you, your rhythms, your breaths, your dreams, have already begun to take over. You blink once, and now let us drift, away from the interface, and into its surreal twin, dreams. When you dream, do you choose your path, or does it choose you? Dreams of the puppet. Some nights, we drift into a world that feels eerily familiar, yet entirely ungoverned by our waking selves. We run, we fall, we fly, we scream, and yet not once do we ask, did I choose that? In the world of dreams, we are not authors. We are characters swept along a script we never wrote. This dream self of ours feels so real. It responds to fear. It cries. It laughs. And yet, it rarely stops to choose. It simply moves, as if pulled by strings from somewhere deep inside a mind that whispers, but never asks for permission. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked as they both sipped tea in the stillness of the evening. "Why in dreams we never say no?" He looked up from his mug, the steam curling like fog. "Maybe because we don't know we can." This is where lucid dreaming becomes fascinating, a brief, shimmering moment where the curtain lifts, where the puppet becomes aware of its strings and tries, trembling to pull back. In those rare instances of lucid dreaming, the dreamer sees the set, the story, the shadows, and realizes, I am dreaming. And even then, choice is delicate, fleeting. One breath too strong and the illusion shatters. One doubt too loud and the dream collapses. If our unconscious mind can spin entire stories without our consent, what does that say about the waking world? When we walk through our daily lives, choosing coffee over tea, turning left instead of right, are we free? Or are we too just lucid dreamers, pretending to pilot a ship that sails on tides deeper than reason? He asked her later, as they watched the moon hang like a pale coin in the sky, "Do you think waking life is that different from a dream?" She smiled softly. "Only in the lighting," she said. "In dreams, the stage is dark. In life, the shadows fall in daylight. But shadows, they remain. Perhaps the line between dreams and decisions is thinner than we want to believe. The puppet dances in both worlds. Only the scenery changes. Our daytime self may believe in agency, in clarity, in the dignity of choice. But beneath that, in the layers of habit, emotion, memory, and unconscious pattern, we are constantly reacting, often before we even know we've begun. So if dreaming shows us how the mind can move without us, waking reminds us how much of life passes before the I wakes up. Maybe free will is not something we have, but something we sense, like a phantom limb we keep reaching for in the dark. And now, let us open our eyes, but not to certainty. Ahead lies a gentle, haunting question. If life could be perfect, comfortable, and pain-free, but came without the burden of choice, would you live it? Would you surrender freedom for peace? Or do we cling to freedom, even if it means chaos? Close your eyes, dear listener, not in sleep this time, but in reflection. The dream never truly ends. It just changes names. The Eden simulation. There's a moment right before sleep where the world begins to feel too kind to be real. Every edge softens. Every worry folds itself into silence. Now picture this feeling, stretching endlessly. A life where nothing hurts. A paradise, not earned but installed. No hunger, no fear. Every step cushioned, every morning golden. A voice whispers, "This is it. You've arrived. You don't have to decide anymore." And maybe at first, that's a relief. The kind you feel when someone else picks dinner for you and gets it just right. When a stranger says, "Don't worry, I've got it." And for once, you believe them. But what if that voice returns tomorrow, and the next day, and then it never leaves? In this thought, we meet Nozick's old question, though dressed in velvet now. Would you plug in? Would you live inside a machine that feeds you only happiness while the world outside moves on? Without you? There's no pain here, but there's no risk either. You'll never get rejected. You'll never fall behind. And yet, you'll never get to choose. One evening, two neighbors talk over a shared fence. Do you ever wonder what your dog dreams about? Probably that he finally caught the squirrel. Yeah, but would he still chase it if it stopped running? That's the catch, isn't it? Joy needs friction. Meaning comes from the chance to choose wrong. To be human is to feel hunger, even in a room full of food. To love knowing the other person might leave. To walk forward despite not knowing where the road ends. So why do we hesitate? Why does this Eden feel just a bit too quiet? Because deep down, we sense that paradise without choice is just anesthesia, a dreamless sleep sold as serenity. And maybe the reason we resist the plug is not because we're brave, but because we know that pain, loss, and uncertainty, they're not glitches in the system, they are the system. Someone once said to me at a quiet coffee shop, "The good days are only good because they were free to be bad first." They smiled, half apologizing for being sentimental. But I didn't mind. I think we need reminders like that, small truths wrapped in casual moments. Because when someone offers you the garden and says you'll never have to think again, you should ask one last thing. If this is paradise, why am I not allowed to leave? And so we drift gently out of the Eden simulation, not rejecting its peace, but remembering its cost. A peace without participation, a story without a pen. Next, we follow that thread even deeper, into something stranger still. What if free will was never meant to be real? Just convincing, just comforting, just enough? Close your eyes now. The question can wait until morning. The useful illusion. There's a quiet comfort in thinking we are the authors of our actions, the sovereign voices behind every decision. Philosopher Daniel Dennett doesn't seek to strip that comfort away, but to reinterpret it. To him, free will is not a myth to be debunked, but a useful illusion, like the dashboard of a car. You don't need to see the engine, you need to understand the speed. Likewise, you don't need full access to the brain's hidden gears, just a coherent story that helps you move through life. So, you're telling me I don't actually choose to hit snooze 5 times every morning? One friend laughs across the dinner table. Well, the other replies, maybe not freely, but it still feels like you do, and that feeling shapes who you are. We build our lives on that story. It gives shape to punishment and praise, makes laws meaningful, art purposeful, and love chosen rather than automatic. Dennett's view doesn't deny the complexity underneath, it honors it. Yes, there are unconscious currents steering us, evolutionary scripts running beneath the stage. But on that stage, something beautiful happens. Narrative, meaning, agency. And maybe that's the deeper point. Freedom isn't the absence of cause, but the presence of self in the process. It's not the blank slate of randomness. It's the slow sculpting of character, of pattern, of personality formed through memory and desire. But a question still lingers in the hush of midnight. If this is an illusion, should we be angry or grateful? Imagine a child holding a toy steering wheel in the back seat of a car, believing they're helping guide the journey. The car still reaches its destination, but that illusion gives the child joy, focus, and a sense of participation. Is it cruel or kind? Dennett leans toward kindness. This illusion, he suggests, is a design feature, not a bug. It's not a deception that breaks us. It's a tool that unites us. The sense of choice allows society to function, to create moral frameworks, to hold each other accountable. Without it, the center may not hold. Still, the metaphor whispers, if we're all behind toy steering wheels, who's really driving? The reflection softens, not into despair, but into clarity. Perhaps we should not mourn the illusion, but understand its purpose. To live meaningfully doesn't require absolute control. It requires stories that work. And sometimes, a useful fiction can be more powerful than a painful truth. Even if it's not real free will, the first friend sighs, I still want to live as if it is. Because otherwise, what's left? Maybe. The second replies gently, what's left is still everything, just seen through a different lens. And now, we drift gently from illusion into influence. If the story of free will holds society together, what happens when someone else writes your lines? If the strings pulling you belong to others, are you still dancing or merely being moved? Let's step into the next dream, where the puppeteer doesn't hide. The hidden hand. There's a moment you've likely had before, when you were about to speak, but didn't. Maybe your voice caught, not because you lacked words, but because something in the room, the pause, the glance, the weight of unspoken expectation, held your tongue in place. That's the hidden hand. It never announces itself, never raises its voice, and yet its influence is unmistakable. Social influence isn't always loud. It doesn't wear uniforms or bang gavels. Sometimes it's a laugh track on a sitcom nudging you to chuckle, or the quiet agreement in a meeting that convinces you not to raise your hand, though you had a different view. Researchers like Solomon Asch showed how simply sitting among people who give the wrong answer can make someone follow along, knowingly. And Stanley Milgram's infamous experiment, where ordinary people delivered what they thought were painful shocks to strangers, showed how obedience can grow not from malice, but from our deep desire to comply, to belong, to avoid rocking the boat. Do you ever feel like you say yes just because everyone else does? He looked at her across the cafe table, stirring sugar into his coffee like it might sweeten the question. She paused, smiled faintly. More often than I'd like, even when I disagree. I nod. It feels safer. He nodded too, not because he agreed, but because he understood. There's no need to see chains when the mind builds its own fences. Social gravity, like physical gravity, pulls without words. A raised eyebrow from someone you respect can make you reconsider a decision. A friend's silence can shape your behavior more than their advice ever could. And sometimes, you don't even realize you've shifted until later, when you wonder why you chose what you did. Was it your decision, or a ripple from the room? Autonomy begins to blur when context colors thought, when the presence of others edits your tone, softens your stance, or rewrites your next step. It feels like freedom, but the strings are threaded with smiles, with norms, with quiet assumptions. Even a simple gesture, a person stepping aside to let you through a door, can make you feel obliged to say thank you, even if you were rushing, even if you were lost in thought. There's something about being seen, being acknowledged, that changes how we behave. The script writes itself faster than we can catch it. In a hallway, one man slows his steps so another can go first. Neither speaks, but both know the rules. And that silent choreography, the nod, the shuffle, the glance, binds them in an invisible contract, one they never signed, yet both uphold. You begin to wonder, if your reactions bend this easily to others, where is your edge? Is there a pure, untouched core from which decisions spring? Or are we always entangled, responding, adjusting, editing ourselves to fit the room we're in? That thought doesn't need an answer tonight. It only needs a place to rest. So as your breath softens and your body begins to release the day, let this idea gently settle into you. You are not weak for being influenced. You are human. To bend, to harmonize, to seek connection isn't the end of autonomy, but part of the quiet dance of being alive among others. And if someone guided your steps, who wrote the story afterward? Let's follow that thought into the next idea, where reason doesn't lead, but follows. The post-rationalizing mind waits just ahead. The storyteller's lie. You believe you know why you did something. You believe your choice had a reason, your reason. But what if that belief is a story told after the fact? There's a quiet trick the mind plays, a soft rearranging of the order of things. Neuroscientist Michael Gazzaniga uncovered something unsettling. Our brains often act before we think, and then, only afterward, invent a story to explain what just happened. You scratch your nose and say it was itchy. You glance at someone and say it was curiosity. But what if neither is true? In experiments with patients who had their brain hemispheres surgically separated, a procedure once used to treat severe epilepsy, Gazzaniga observed a strange phenomenon. One side of the brain would initiate an action. The other, unaware of the motive, would still offer an explanation that was entirely fabricated, but confidently delivered. The brain didn't say, "I don't know." It said, "I meant to do that because," and the voice sounded so sincere. This mechanism is called confabulation, the brain filling in blanks with plausible tales, not to deceive others, but to reassure itself. The mind cannot bear a void, so it builds bridges of logic over gaps of impulse. And in doing so, it creates a narrator, a calm voice telling a tale about why you did what you did. But this narrator, as soothing as it sounds, does not write the script. It just reads it aloud. "So wait," a voice asks in the dark, "are you saying I didn't choose to eat that cake?" The other voice replies, "Maybe you did, but maybe your body moved first, and your mind wrote the reason later." There's a silence, then a sigh. "I felt like I chose it." "Yes," the other says gently, "and that feeling might be the most elegant fiction ever told. It doesn't mean we're broken. It means we're storytellers by nature. Our inner narrator weaves motives, ideals, even dreams, sometimes for clarity, sometimes for comfort. But in doing so, it may deceive us more than anyone else could. If the self is a story, then who is the author? The conscious you, or the impulses below? And if free will is real, why must it hide behind narrative? Tonight, as you drift, let this thought settle into your breath. What if you are not the origin of your reasons, but the listener of their echoes? Now, let us step from the quiet theater of the mind into the public stage, where choices appear free, but some doors were locked before you ever knew they existed. The illusion of choice. You felt like you chose, like the freedom curled warm in your palm. 2 options, maybe 3. A path that looked like yours. But pause for a moment. Who built the path? A woman stands before a vending machine, hesitating. "Should I pick the lemon tea or the black coffee?" she whispers aloud, half to herself. A man waiting nearby glances over. "They're out of water," he says casually, pointing to the grayed out button. She nods, relieved maybe, or resigned. But in her mind, she still chose. That's the illusion. In psychology, it's called choice architecture, the subtle, silent shaping of decisions long before you notice you're deciding. Grocery aisles, app interfaces, political ballots, even conversations with loved ones, each offers choices that seem free, while hiding the infinite ones that never made it to the shelf. It's not deception exactly. It's curation. Like being handed a menu in a restaurant you didn't pick, in a city you didn't choose to be in. You still decide, chicken or pasta, but the ocean, the mountains, the fasts and the feasts, none were invited to your table, and the mind adapts so quietly. I was going to pick this anyway, we tell ourselves. The voice of rationalization is soft and convincing, like a friend smoothing the creases of discomfort. But beneath it all, there's a subtle pressure, one you can't quite name, guiding your hand every time. Late at night, in quiet rooms, this thought sometimes flickers. What would I have wanted if I had never been told what to want? A couple sits together on a bench. He scrolls his phone. She looks at the sky. "Do you ever wonder," she asks softly, "if our taste in music would be different if we grew up in a different language?" He pauses, then smiles. Maybe even our love stories would have been written differently. That's not cynicism. That's curiosity, the gentle tug to peek behind the curtain. Because the real loss isn't just that your options are filtered, it's that your imagination might be too. Maybe freedom isn't about picking from a list, but dreaming up the list yourself. What happens when every map we're given leads to the same cities, the same destinations with different names? What do we miss when we never think to step off the path? True autonomy may begin not with action, but with vision, with knowing you can ask for something that was never offered. So if your choices feel narrow lately, let it be a small invitation, not to panic, but to widen the frame. Not all choices are loud. Some are quiet awakenings that say, you can ask different questions. And as your breath settles and your body drifts downward like ink in still water, let this final question ripple gently through you. If you could choose anything at all beyond what you've been shown, what would it be? Not now, not urgently. Let it sit beside you like a soft echo. Next, we will step into that echo, the world of desires, and ask, are even your dreams yours? Manufactured desires. Have you ever stopped mid-purchase and wondered, do I truly want this, or was I told to? It's a quiet thought, easy to dismiss, yet it echoes through every click, scroll, and checkout screen of modern life. Somewhere beneath the illusion of freedom lies a more orchestrated truth. Your desires may not be yours at all. Advertising doesn't merely respond to our needs. It anticipates them, molds them, and then sells them back to us with a smile. Consumer psychology has evolved into an art of gentle intrusion. A color palette makes us feel trust. A celebrity's casual smile nudges our self-image. A slogan repeats until it becomes our inner voice. Slowly, a craving forms, not from hunger or necessity, but from the subtle suggestion that this product will make us more whole, more seen, more enough. Two people sit across a cafe table, phones in hand. Did you always want that bag? I thought I did. But now, I don't know. Everyone had it. It felt like, if I didn't, I was missing something. Missing what? She pauses. Belonging, maybe. What if your longing is someone else's strategy? The promise of status, beauty, ease, carefully engineered, not discovered. Influencers stage authentic lives, brands master emotional hooks, and trends bloom overnight like dreams planted in our sleep. We think we choose, but often we are simply given choices pre-wrapped in aspiration. It raises a difficult question. If even our wants are not organic, then what remains of freedom? Imagine living in a beautifully decorated room. You're free to move the furniture, free to choose the corner you sit in. But what if you didn't build the walls? What if someone else picked the view? A young man stares at his cart online, then sighs, "I don't need any of this, but I still want it." His friend shrugs. Maybe that's the point. We don't chase needs anymore. We chase identities. The implications reach further than we care to admit. When desire is curated, when our preferences are guided by algorithms trained to outsmart our conscious minds, are we still choosing or merely responding? And in that responding, how free can we be? What we crave defines how we live. But if our cravings are no longer born from within, then even liberty can be dressed in disguise. A decision made in a mirror room reflects only the image of freedom, not its essence. So tonight, as you rest, reflect not only on what you want, but why. Trace the thread. Does it lead inward or outward? And if our desires are manufactured, then what becomes of will? Now we turn toward that deeper mystery. Maybe our entire understanding of will itself is flawed. What if it's not a power, but a performance? The will that wasn't. Sometimes you reach for strength and find only silence. It's late. You've had a long day. The dishes still sit in the sink. The inbox keeps blinking, and somewhere between your intention to act and your body's refusal to move, something quietly dissolves. Willpower, once sharp and noble, melts into the ordinary mess of being human. Psychologists tell us that willpower is not a constant force. It flickers, fades, and depends heavily on blood sugar, rest, and emotional reserves. When you're tired, you're not just tired, you're less yourself. The part of you that says no to the easy road, that holds the line of discipline and delay, becomes foggy and slow. And yet, in the stories we tell ourselves, we are always the ones in control. Do you ever skip your morning routine just once? A voice asks from the side of a nearly empty train, and then wonder how a single break unravels a whole week. The answer, unspoken but deeply felt, is yes, we all do. There's a quiet tragedy to how fragile our so-called strength really is. In the glow of a well-lit room with enough sleep and a peaceful mind, you might say no to that second slice of cake. But put that same self in a stressful meeting, on an empty stomach, with a screen blinking notifications. You might say yes before you even know what happened, and then you justify it. It was just one time. It doesn't count today. I'll start again tomorrow. But beneath these whispers, the truth waits like a current beneath the ice. The will we praise is not always ours to command. It comes and goes like a visitor, sometimes loyal, sometimes lost. And if our choices ride on such fragile threads, can we really call them ours? I told myself I'd go for a run tonight, someone says, laughing gently as they pull off their shoes. But the couch had better arguments. We've all been there. Not out of failure, but out of being human. Willpower, then, is less a throne we sit on and more like a tightrope strung between two winds. A step forward feels noble when the sky is clear, but add rain, hunger, a restless night, and even heroes falter. So we tell ourselves stories, not lies exactly, just survival songs. Songs like, "I'm still in control," or "Tomorrow I'll do better." Because if we don't sing them, what's left? Acknowledging how little command we truly have might shatter something we rely on just to get through the day. Still, there's a strange mercy in knowing this, that not every stumble means we've failed. That discipline isn't broken, just sleeping. That saying no takes more than strength. It takes silence, space, and softness. And so, if tonight your will has wandered, let it. You're not less for being tired. You're not weak for giving in. You're simply here, in this moment, where the mind exhales and the body seeks peace. Let's now follow that fading strength into the realm of fatigue, where even the most determined mind's drift and freedom forgets to keep its eyes open. Autopilot Existence. There's a quiet hum beneath the surface of our lives, so subtle, so seamless, that most of us rarely notice it. It's the hum of routine. Wake up, reach for your phone, brush your teeth with the same hand, the same strokes. Walk into the kitchen, brew coffee, check notifications, reply to messages. You don't decide to do these things anew each day. They unfold like choreography set in motion long before your conscious mind catches up. I swear I don't even remember driving home, she says, glancing at her keys already on the counter. Same, he replies. It's like I blinked and I was pulling into the driveway. They both chuckle, but neither questions the eerie truth buried in their exchange. When were they truly awake? Neuroscience calls it automaticity, the brain's way of conserving energy by encoding repeated actions into neural shortcuts. Think of it as a mental cruise control. These are not decisions in the traditional sense. They're rehearsed movements, triggered by cues, driven by habit loops, and carried out with precision but minimal awareness. At first glance, this seems efficient. After all, not every choice needs full attention. We can't afford to deliberate every morning over how to tie our shoes. But what happens when the autopilot doesn't shut off? When entire days, weeks even, blur together under the haze of repetition. You scroll through social media not because you chose to, but because your thumb already knew the path. We speak of being present as if it were a mystical state, but perhaps it's simply rare. If your mind is elsewhere during most actions, where is the self that chooses? In these moments, are you doing life, or is life doing you? It's a question that lingers, not to accuse, but to awaken. If freedom exists, it's not just in breaking chains, it's in breaking patterns. To reclaim even one conscious breath in the middle of a mechanical morning is to plant a flag on the territory of free will. But few do, because it's easier, gentler, to drift. So what? I need to think about every little thing I do? Not everything, she replies, but maybe just notice when you're not really here. He pauses. Like, now? She smiles. Now's a good start. And so, in the rhythm of habit, in the soft hum of a life on loop, lies a paradox. We move forward, but forget to arrive. We are actors in our own stories, yet often absent from the scene. As we float beyond the comfort of routine, another mystery surfaces, one even more elusive than habit. What if, even when we believe we're deciding, the choice has already passed us by? Let's step into that thought. From autopilot to afterthought, we now approach the lag between intent and action, the strange delay that might make even our moments of awareness just echoes. The lag of awareness. It happens faster than you can notice. A hand reaches for the glass before your mind says, "I'm thirsty." Your foot taps the brake before your voice inside whispers, "Stop." The action has begun, but you're still arriving. Like a letter that lands after the conversation has already changed course. In the quiet dim of a laboratory, long ago, a curious thing was seen. Electrodes mapped the mind's murmurings, and in those few flickering moments, before a person felt they'd chosen, something inside had already fired. Benjamin Libet's work gave it a name, the readiness potential. The brain stirred before awareness did. She leaned back on the cafe bench, coffee warm in hand, and said, Sometimes I catch myself already mid-sentence and wonder who started speaking. He nodded. Yeah, like when you're laughing before you even know what's funny. And between them stretched a silence that wasn't empty, but full of wondering. This strange delay that the brain begins before the self declares feels like a magician pulling the card before the volunteer picks it. But you weren't tricked. You were simply later than you thought. Is your I then just a commentator, arriving breathless to the scene of decisions already made? Perhaps your mind is a soft journalist, scribbling reasons onto the moments that memory captures, not what intention creates. It doesn't make you powerless. It makes you mysterious. Like a moon that reflects light, it does not ignite. Think about the warmth of an apology you didn't expect to give, words tumbling out before you fully chose them, or the sudden yes that rose in your chest without consulting your head. These aren't just moments. They are mirrors, glimpses of a self not always at the helm, but always trying to steer. Somewhere in the soft murmur of everyday life, a stranger holds open the door without asking why. Maybe they smiled. Maybe you smiled back. But neither of you asked permission from your minds. It just happened. You don't need to force an answer. Not tonight. Let that gentle delay cradle you instead. Because maybe being human isn't about controlling the flame, but learning to feel its heat and not run from it. You are not broken. You are just beautifully timed. Now let's drift further. Not toward a decision, but toward the space just before one. A pause, a hush, the breath between thoughts. That might just be where you really live, and we're about to step inside it. Sleep when you need to. You can always return. The sacred pause. Somewhere between the moment a word wounds us and the instant we reply with anger, there is a quiet flicker of possibility. Not a loud one, not one you can grasp easily, but it's there, a sacred pause, a breath between the spark and the flame. Psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor Viktor Frankl once said, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose." This quote echoes like a prayer for freedom in a world rushing to automate everything, even emotion. In that space, frail and fleeting as a snowflake on skin, we may discover the only form of freedom that truly matters: awareness. Modern neuroscience tells us much of what we do is automatic. Our brains are energy-saving machines, trained to react faster than we can think. A noise triggers a flinch. A word sparks defensiveness. A glance invites judgment. It's efficient, but it's also mechanical. Yet mindfulness, that ancient and now scientifically supported practice, can change the tempo. It stretches the space between impulse and action. And in that stretch, a new path opens. One we weren't forced onto, but stepped toward. Imagine two friends sitting by a quiet lake. "Why didn't you snap back at her when she insulted you?" one asks. The other shrugs. I paused. I noticed I wanted to snap, but I also noticed I didn't have to. That pause, that noticing, it's not passive, it's a rebellion, a sacred rebellion against the mindless march of reflex. But the pause is fragile. Life moves fast. The world is noisy. Our devices chirp, our schedules press, and the window to act differently can vanish before we even know it opened. That's the tragedy and the miracle. Because freedom doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And so the question arises, is free will not a constant possession, but an occasional visitor? A momentary offering that appears only when we're still enough to receive it. Perhaps freedom isn't in the big decisions, the dramatic moments, or the speeches about independence. Maybe it's in the half second between the ping of a phone and the urge to check it. Maybe it's in the pause before you send a message you'll regret, or in the choice to simply breathe. That's the kind of freedom we rarely celebrate because it doesn't look like a triumph. It looks like silence, but it is sacred, because in that breath, you are no longer reacting, you are deciding. And for a moment, however brief, you are no longer just the product of past patterns. You are the author. So we drift here, at the edge of this delicate silence. And from this stillness, we now prepare to step into noise, the relentless hum of prediction, where technology doesn't wait for your choice, because it already knows it. Now, let us follow the path from inner awareness to outer automation and ask, if your next move can be predicted, is it still yours at all? Algorithmic Destiny. There's a quiet hum behind the screen, not a sound really, but a presence. It watches, not with eyes, but with patterns. When you tap, scroll, pause, when you linger too long on a face, when your fingers hesitate over a thumbnail without knowing why. It learns, not from your words, but from your rhythms, your digital heartbeat, measured and mapped. That's strange, one woman mutters, glancing down at her phone. It's like this app knew I was feeling nostalgic before I did. Her friend smiles, not surprised. I think mine knows when I'm about to feel guilty. The ads always shift right before I remember something. This isn't magic. It's mathematics dressed in intention. Predictive algorithms do not just show you the world, they reshape it. What article appears first? Which resume gets a second glance? Whose smile you're nudged to like? It's not mind control. It's suggestion so seamless, it becomes indistinguishable from desire. Somewhere along the feed, you stopped choosing. Or perhaps, choices stopped being yours entirely. Instead of an open sky, we are offered weather forecasts for the soul. You may like this. Others like you also felt this. What begins as convenience melts into design. And so the question arises, not in fear, but in quiet curiosity. Do we still move toward what we want, or toward what was chosen for us to want? There's something oddly poetic about being known so deeply by something that has never met you. It's intimacy without touch, knowledge without empathy, like a ghost that grew up watching you, predicting not only your habits, but your hesitations too. A man laughs softly while looking at a suggested playlist. I didn't even remember this song existed. The woman beside him nods. It remembered for you. There's a silence, not empty, more like a held breath. If every option has already been ranked before it reaches you, if your path is paved by preferences you didn't know you had, then what remains of free will? Perhaps it's no longer the thrill of choice, but the illusion of direction, like riding a moving walkway in an airport, where you think you're walking, but the floor carries you. And yet, some part of us still rebels, not with rage, but with small acts of presence, closing the app for no reason, ignoring the perfect recommendation, choosing the song that doesn't match the mood. In that quiet resistance, is there something sacred? Or is even that expected? A move calculated into the next cycle of data? The mind, after all, does not sleep alone anymore. As your thoughts soften like dusk behind closed eyes, one final question stirs gently in the background. If freedom once meant the unknown, and the unknown is now predicted, what word shall we use for the thing we lost? Let us now step back in time to older minds who faced this riddle without data, without screens. The Stoics, long before algorithms, may have already whispered an answer: to let go, in order to be free. Stoic Surrender. You don't have to clench your fists to be free. Sometimes, true strength whispers, like the hush before dawn, asking not for power, but for peace. Why does life feel lighter when we stop fighting the tide? She asked, laying her head on the couch cushion, her voice low and full of the kind of tired that doesn't come from lack of sleep. Maybe because we were never meant to fight the tide, he replied, glancing up from the book in his hands. Maybe the Stoics had it right. Maybe freedom is flowing with the current, not thrashing against it. Marcus Aurelius once sat in the middle of a crumbling empire and wrote not about conquest, but about calm, about how storms rage, but the mind can still be still. And Epictetus, a slave in chains, taught that the only true prison is wanting to control the uncontrollable. It sounds paradoxical at first. Surrender as freedom. But the Stoics weren't promoting passivity. They offered a map to inner liberty. Instead of chaining your happiness to events, they taught you to anchor it in your judgment, your perspective, your response. That's the quiet revelation. You can be calm without being numb. You can surrender without being defeated. Let go, not out of despair, but out of clarity. And in that release, something shifts. The need to constantly manage life dissolves. The weather changes, people leave, fate arrives uninvited. But you're still here, intact. Not because you bent the world, but because you stopped expecting it to bend for you. He looked out the window, fingers absent-mindedly tracing the glass. So, if we can't control life, he murmured, what's left? Choice, she whispered. Not what happens, but how gently we walk through it. This isn't a surrender that weakens. It refines. It strips away illusion. The illusion that if we try hard enough, we'll never suffer. The illusion that we are puppeteers of a universe built on chaos. The Stoic surrender is not passive. It's an active realignment, a conscious decision to step out of the wrestling ring and sit with the storm, unafraid. It's not the coward's escape. It's the philosopher's climb, higher ground, a place above the noise where peace is not absence of difficulty, but presence of purpose. And in that place, even pain has meaning. Even loss feels softer. Even time slows down, just enough for you to take a breath. As the candle flickers in the dark and your thoughts begin to settle into that familiar rhythm of night, ask yourself, what am I clinging to that never was mine to hold? Let it go. Let it pass. Float, not because you gave up, but because you finally rose. And now, in the stillness left behind, we drift deeper, into a place where perhaps no self is needed at all, where behavior may continue, even without a mind. What then becomes of will? What then are we? Zombie behavior. Sometimes you walk into a room and forget why you came, but your feet carried you there with the precision of memory. Your hands opened the door without pause, and your body moved as though it knew something you did not. That's where we begin tonight, in the quiet machinery that keeps moving when the mind has slipped away. There's a term in neuroscience, zombie agents. Not the ghoulish ones in films, but the parts of you that act without needing your voice. They are the motor systems that tie your shoelaces while you're worrying about a meeting. They are the graceful fingers playing piano notes you don't remember learning. They are the familiar turns you take while driving home, even though your mind is 1,000 miles away. And when we step back and notice it, the question arises gently, like fog lifting off a lake. Who or what is actually steering? One evening, a man sat beside a woman on a bench. Their bags rested at their feet, untouched. She glanced sideways and asked with no urgency, "Have you ever arrived somewhere and realized you don't remember the trip?" He laughed softly. Every Monday, maybe every Tuesday too. She smiled. Then who brought you here? That's the shape of the mystery. If we can move, speak, decide without conscious thought, what is consciousness for? Is it the conductor or merely the spotlight that arrives after the orchestra has already begun? And yet, it doesn't feel mechanical. You wake up from your trance mid-drive and the world still feels stitched together. You reach the last page of a book you barely remember reading. You hold a coffee and can't recall pouring it. But there it is. Warm, real, perfectly timed. So what part of you did the living? Some say consciousness is just a narration, a soft whisper that follows behind action, not before it. Like a tour guide speaking through a headset after the path has already been laid. And in that, there's a strange comfort. Not that we are absent, but that we are deeply embedded in the rhythm of life, responsive, adaptable, and maybe not in charge the way we thought. It's not about losing control. It's about understanding that control isn't always what makes life meaningful. There is grace in autopilot. Not all motion needs a commander. A river flows without planning. So do you. And maybe that's why we find ourselves drawn to repetition. The tapping of fingers on the desk, the nightly rituals, the way your body knows how to lie down when the day is done. No command, just flow, just quiet trust in the pattern. As you drift deeper, feel free to let the inner narrator grow faint, not silenced, just softened. There is nothing wrong with sleepwalking through a few miles of life. The miracle is not in being awake for every second. The miracle is that you arrive at all. And now, as the night folds itself around us, we tilt inward, not into behavior, but into identity. The story we carry about who we are and who tells it when the mind goes quiet. Let's listen. Let's let go. Let's ask, when the voice fades, who remains? The fiction of self. It begins quietly, like the whisper of a memory you're not sure is yours. That subtle voice inside, the one that says I, feels constant, like the sun behind the clouds. But what if it's only a flicker in the storm? Some neuroscientists say there is no single you sitting at the helm, no unified soul or captain behind your eyes, just neurons firing in loops, stitching together a pattern that feels personal. Like a novelist writing a protagonist with quirks and flaws, your brain drafts the character you believe to be yourself, built from memories half-remembered, preferences shaped by repetition, and roles rehearsed so often they've become costume. Do you ever feel like you're playing a role? Like you're someone different with your family, your partner, your job? All the time. But if I'm all those things, which one is actually me? Maybe none. Or maybe the you is just the one asking that question. It's a haunting idea, that the self might be less like a solid rock and more like mist on a mirror. You try to grasp it, and it vanishes into the warmth of your own breath. The mind constructs continuity, stitching together yesterday's emotions with today's goals, as if they belong to the same person. But pull back the curtain, and you find no permanent entity, only a narrative thread, weaving through moments. And if the self is a story, then what about choice? Can a character inside a book choose its path? Or is the illusion of freedom just another plot device? Maybe free will isn't something the self uses, but something the self invents. A clever turn in the script that makes us feel like we're steering, even as the plot unfolds on its own. What if I never really chose this life? Then maybe the choice was the story you told yourself to make sense of it. And when the story ends, Maybe the author vanishes with the final page. It's not hopeless. In fact, it's strangely freeing. If you are not fixed, you are not trapped. You can revise. You can rewrite. You can let go of being the hero, the victim, the achiever, the forgiver, and simply rest in the knowing that you are not one name, one face, one thread, but the whole loom. As the sense of self loosens, a softer awareness emerges, one not bound by the old scripts or familiar titles. And as we float forward into the deeper question, if the self dissolves, what does it mean to act? We may need to abandon the old definitions of freedom entirely. Let the next breath come, not because you willed it, but because it was time. Action without identity. There are moments, quiet ones, where you move without needing to explain why. Your hands straighten a picture frame. Your lips form an apology before your mind catches up. The motion arrives first, like a wind sweeping through a curtain before you even know the window is open. Buddhist teachers once whispered that there is no doer behind the deed, just conditions, just causes, just the flickering of life playing out in form. Postmodern thinkers nodded in agreement, watching language collapse on itself. The I that claims credit, a clever narrator arriving after the fact, puffing its chest and pointing backwards. That was me. But was it? Picture a lake stirred by falling leaves. Ripples stretch across the surface, beautiful and unowned. No single leaf intends to create them, yet they appear. Perfectly timed, perfectly shaped. That's what your choices might be. Emergent, conditioned, but no author in sight. Do you think people ever really choose? Someone murmurs, maybe from across a kitchen table, half distracted by boiling tea. A soft laugh replies, only when they feel guilty. That's when we scramble for ownership. Even that moment, where two people share an insight like passing a secret in a folded napkin, might not belong to either of them. Just experience, unfolding through borrowed mouths. You hold the door for a stranger. Not because you're kind, not because you believe in manners, but because it was raining. And once, long ago, someone did it for you. That memory lives not in your name, but in the nervous system. And now it echoes. If the self is a campfire, identity is only the smoke. You see it curling upward and assume there's a flame that caused it. But look closely. It's the other way around. The fire was built from twigs left by countless seasons. Family, culture, trauma, joy, timing. And when it burns out, the smoke lingers for a moment, tracing the outline of something that never had a solid form. So what does that mean for free will? If there's no self to own an action, can a decision still be yours? Maybe agency isn't something we have, but something that happens through us, like music through a flute. Each note shaped by breath, but not possessed by the instrument. Someone once stepped aside on the subway platform, smiled, and said, "You first. You look like you've got a better destination." And though their voice felt personal, their words belonged to 1,000 habits, kindnesses, scripts, and silent influences. In that way, the dance goes on, fluid, graceful, sometimes chaotic, but never requiring a dancer to claim it. So if you feel a heaviness, a pressure to always know who you are before you act, you can let it go. You can move without a name, speak without a label, live without a resume of reasons. Because perhaps freedom is not in controlling every gesture, but in letting the gestures flow. You don't need to decide whether that insight is true or not. You only need to rest in its warmth for now, as if lying near a fire you didn't build, but still feel safe beside. Let the thought settle. Let the need to grasp dissolve, and as the breath softens, let us drift now, not toward selfhood, but toward a grander illusion, one that whispers, "The game was set long before you arrived, the script already written, and your role quietly assigned." The cosmic script. It begins quietly, like a whisper traveling through the void, an idea so strange it feels like a riddle from the stars themselves. What if everything you've ever done was already written, not in the ink of destiny, but in the laws of physics? Imagine walking down a path, believing you chose it, only to find that the path had always been there, waiting, inevitable. Classical physics once dreamed of such a certainty. In that world, the universe is a machine. Every atom hums in place, following laws so rigid that, given full knowledge of all particles and their velocities, the future could be computed like a chessboard. This is the dream of Laplace's demon, a hypothetical mind so powerful it could, in theory, predict the entire future from the present. If such a mind existed, your next breath, your deepest heartbreak, even this very thought, were all already known. And if they're already known, did you ever choose them? "Wait," says one voice in a conversation between two friends on a long night walk. "So you're saying everything I do was pre-written? Like, I'm not actually making decisions?" "Well," the other answers gently, "maybe it's like being in a play. You're given lines, a scene, but you still perform it. You still feel it. You still mean it. That's the strange paradox. If determinism is true, if the universe is just dominoes falling, then we're not free from the script. But maybe we're free within it. Like actors in a cosmic theater, the beauty doesn't come from making up the play, but from bringing it to life. Perhaps freedom isn't about writing the story, it's about understanding your role in it, consciously, to know your lines, to speak them with heart, to step into the same moment that was always waiting for you and own it anyway. Still, there's a haunting undertone. If all is predetermined, then where is agency? Are you the actor or merely the puppet? Is awareness enough to make performance sacred? The night deepens. The stars overhead flicker like ancient code, and the two friends walk in silence now, each pondering their place in the unfolding script. One of them finally says, maybe it's not about changing the story. Maybe it's about waking up inside it. As the scene fades, we are left with a question that's not easily answered. If everything is written, what happens when the reader becomes aware? Let us now move from fate to perception itself, from stage to silence, from script to the observer. Is reality waiting for us, or are we writing it by the very act of looking? The observer effect. A beam of moonlight dances across the floor, undisturbed until your gaze touches it. Suddenly, it seems to shimmer differently, as if your attention has changed its rhythm. In the realm of quantum physics, this isn't just poetic fancy, it's a fundamental mystery. In the double-slit experiment, particles, tiny, indivisible flecks of matter, don't behave like objects at all. Left unmeasured, they act like waves, flowing with infinite possibilities. But the moment someone watches, something changes. The wave collapses into a particle, a single path among many, as if the universe hesitates, waiting for an eye to decide which version of it becomes real. It's not magic, it's measurement. But what's unsettling isn't the physics, it's the metaphor. If simply looking can force a decision in matter itself, then maybe our attention isn't passive. Maybe to observe is already to choose. And if that's true, what does it say about our freedom? Are you saying Just paying attention could count as a decision? Someone whispers, almost skeptically, like they're trying not to wake a thought too big for midnight. The reply is slower, softer. Not just a decision, maybe the only one that matters. You look at your life, what you see, what you notice, what you turn toward. Is it so different from collapsing probabilities? Every day, countless paths blur together in the background. But the one you look at, that's the one that solidifies. Not because you forced it into existence, but because your gaze wove it into reality. It changes the way we think of willpower. You might believe you decide with bold declarations, written goals, plans scribbled in ink. But what if your true choices are made in the quiet act of noticing? What you let your eyes rest on, what you allow your mind to return to again and again, like waves coming home to the same rock. Even the smallest things, like how you pause at the sound of someone humming a tune that reminds you of being safe, or how your gaze lingers half a second longer on a cracked mug because it was once a gift. These aren't dramatic choices. They're gentle, unnoticed turns of attention. And maybe they shape your life more than any vow ever could. I didn't plan to fall in love, someone might say, half apologizing. But you kept noticing her. The other would smile. So perhaps what we call free will isn't the thunder of action, but the stillness before it. A kind of sacred spotlight we cast without realizing. You don't need to do something loud to be free. You just need to look with care. And here's the paradox that tucks itself under the covers with you tonight. If your observation shapes reality, then as you drift towards sleep, even the act of closing your eyes is a kind of surrender, a release of control that might be the deepest kind of freedom. Let it be okay not to choose right now. Let the particles rest, undisturbed. If attention creates the world, then this moment, quiet, soft, and slow, might be the most real one of all. Now we leave the trembling edge of quantum mystery and step into something even more intimate, the theater of the mind. What if the feeling of being free is just another illusion, something handcrafted, moment by moment, in the hidden folds of your brain? We're almost there, but for now, just rest. You can always return. The brain's illusion. It begins quietly, like a whisper behind your thoughts, the subtle certainty that you chose, that you decided to move your hand, blink your eye, speak a word. But beneath this smooth illusion of control, the brain is often writing its own script, while letting you believe you're the author. In the silent chambers of cognitive neuroscience labs, researchers have uncovered a strange and haunting truth. The sense of agency, the inner feeling that I did this, can be fabricated. In split brain experiments, where the communication bridge between hemispheres is severed, each side of the brain can act independently. The left hemisphere, tasked with creating narratives, will often invent justifications for actions the right hemisphere initiated, without any awareness of the disconnect. The result? A brain that lies to itself with total confidence. This illusion becomes even more surreal with direct brain stimulation. Subjects have reported raising their hands and genuinely believing they meant to, when in fact, the impulse was artificially created by an electrode. Conversely, when asked why they didn't move, though they clearly had, they offer elaborate rationalizations, convinced the motion came from elsewhere. What this reveals is quietly unsettling. The story we tell ourselves about intending to act may come after the action itself. Wait, so I could be doing things and just filling in the reasons later? Yeah, she answers, brushing crumbs off her sleeve. like your brain's doing improv and pretending it's a plan. Then who's really steering? She smiles. Maybe nobody. Or maybe the steering wheel was decorative all along. If the experience of willing something can be synthesized, denied, or reversed by neural trickery, then what we call free will might not be a capacity, but a sensation, a feeling, like warmth or color. And just as red doesn't exist in the world, but only in your mind's translation of light, perhaps free will is not in the doing, but in the telling of the doing. This realization doesn't scream. It hums in the background like a forgotten radio station. You live your life believing you're the driver, but the more you observe, the more it seems your brain is a magician, performing sleights of hand behind the curtain, then bowing and letting you take the applause. And yet, even if freedom is illusory, it still feels sacred. We guard our autonomy, debate ethics, build laws and meaning around the idea that we could have done otherwise. If this is a dream, it's one we're reluctant to wake from. So let us pause here, in this soft dissonance between biology and belief. If the illusion gives us structure, dignity even, then maybe it matters less whether it's true, and more how we live with it. Because coming up next, we'll step into the moral maze. If freedom is fiction, should we still protect the story? The ethical illusion. Imagine this. You're sitting on a park bench, watching people pass by. One shouts at their child, another helps an elderly man with his groceries. You can't help but judge, one harshly, the other kindly. But then your friend beside you asks, what if none of them actually chose to act that way? You pause. The thought lingers like a ripple across your calm, mental lake. What if the very fabric of ethics, praise, blame, reward, punishment, is woven not from truth, but from illusion? Legal systems are built on the premise of choice. Courts ask, could this person have acted differently? And when the answer is yes, we assign guilt. But neuroscience is whispering otherwise. Studies show that decisions are often made before we're even aware of them. The conscious mind, proud and upright, may simply be narrating actions it didn't author. And yet, we still blame, still punish, still believe in justice. Is that fair? Your friend asks. It might not be fair, you reply slowly, but maybe it's necessary. This is the paradox of the ethical illusion. If we admit that free will is fiction, do we risk crumbling society's foundation? Or, more radically, can we rewrite that foundation in gentler ink? Philosophers like Daniel Dennett argue that responsibility doesn't require metaphysical truth. It requires practical necessity. We act as if people could choose, because doing so reinforces behavior. In other words, we need the illusion, not for the individual, but for the system. It's a game of collective belief, but a new wave of thought offers something different. A vision not of punishment, but understanding. Not of blame, but restoration. Imagine prisons not as cages, but as places of healing. Imagine justice rooted not in vengeance, but in causality, a compassionate response to cause and effect. If a person steals because they were raised in scarcity and pain, do we punish the act or address the path that led there? Your friend turns again. So what happens if we let go of blame? We may lose the sharp edges of morality, you answer. But maybe, just maybe, we gain something softer, something wiser. Responsibility, then, becomes less about assigning fault and more about responding wisely, like guiding a river that floods not from evil, but from rainfall. As night deepens and your thoughts grow quiet, you realize perhaps ethics doesn't collapse without free will. Perhaps it evolves into something more conscious, more kind, a social contract not of guilt, but of growth. And so, as the stars begin to peek through the navy sky, we take one final breath before our next descent into the quiet world of meditation, where the self observes and sometimes chooses not to choose. The meditator's paradox: a single breath, not controlled, not forced, just noticed. That's where it begins, in the quiet, in that calm, cradling moment when the world no longer demands your name, and even your thoughts soften into whispers. You sit, you breathe, and suddenly, you are no longer the storm, but the one watching clouds move across the sky. Thoughts appear like passing strangers, some loud and impatient, others barely a murmur. But you don't greet them. You don't chase them down the street. You just stay. A man once said to me in a laundromat, "It's funny, sometimes I come here just to hear the machines hum." He wasn't doing laundry. He was just there, just being. That's when it hit me. There's something deeply human about stillness, something ancient, as if we're remembering something the noise made us forget. In meditation, we learn this lesson again and again. We are not our thoughts. We're not the cravings, not the plans, not even the pain. We are the space they pass through, the quiet theater where drama plays, but no one claps, no one cries, only presence. It feels strange at first, like pausing a song right before the chorus, like waiting at a green light just to feel the silence between decisions. But in that very hesitation, there is something profound. To act is human, but to not act, to simply witness without reacting, that feels divine. There's a paradox that forms in this state. The less you interfere, the freer you feel. You stop chasing choice, and instead, choice dissolves, replaced by clarity. Stillness is no longer a lack of action. It becomes its own kind of wisdom, a silent knowing, a kind of freedom that doesn't need to move. A friend once told me about walking into a crowded cafe where every seat was taken. He didn't push, didn't ask. He just stood there, hands in pockets, calm as a monk, and then a chair freed up. No rush, no claim, just presence, rewarded. That's what this segment whispers to you in the dark, that perhaps true liberation isn't the ability to do anything, but the courage to do nothing at all, and still be whole. To feel the current without paddling, to be in life without forcing it. Maybe that's why, in some traditions, enlightenment isn't an explosion, but a fading. Not a fire, but a candle flickering low, casting long shadows on the wall of self. You might drift off now. That's okay. Let the thoughts slip away like water through cupped hands. You don't need to hold on. There's no task here, no decision to make, only breath, only being. And when you're ready, maybe not now, maybe later, we'll continue. Because next, we leave the silence and step back into the noise. But this time with a question. If none of us is truly choosing, who carries the blame when the world breaks? Rest gently, my friend. The current will carry you. The blame illusion. What if the finger we point has always been aimed in the wrong direction? In a world where free will fades like a mirage in the desert, blame begins to shimmer with uncertainty. The idea that we are the authors of our actions, deserving either punishment or praise, collapses under the quiet weight of neuroscience. When a brain tumor makes a man commit a crime, or when childhood trauma wires the mind toward chaos, how can we still whisper the word guilty and believe it means the same thing? Science peels back the curtain on behavior, revealing the ghostwriters of our choices, genes, chemicals, memories we didn't ask for. The courtroom becomes a theater of contradiction. One judge insists the defendant chose. Another sees only the machinery of biology unfolding. It's no longer just a philosophical question. It's a legal reckoning. If someone's capacity to choose is diminished, can we punish them the same as someone who appears in control? Or is in control just another illusion dressed in a suit? Two friends walk together, one sipping coffee, the other lost in thought. Did you hear about that guy in the news? The one with the brain cyst? Yeah. They said he started stealing out of nowhere. They didn't send him to prison, sent him to treatment. That's wild. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? What if a part of you misfires one day and you don't even know you're different? We begin to question everything we thought we knew about justice. The courtroom may still hold a gavel, but perhaps the real transformation lies not in punishment, but in understanding. If agency is slippery, maybe accountability needs a new face. One that looks not for revenge, but for roots. One that asks, what caused this, rather than who must pay? And so we arrive at the fragile intersection of justice and mercy. If blame is a mirror that reflects more of the system than the self, then what do we do with our anger? Do we lash out at people who were never truly in charge of their missteps? Or do we build systems that prevent harm in the first place? Systems that heal, not harm. You might wonder, if we give up blame, do we lose control? Or could it be the opposite? By removing blame, we begin to see each other more clearly, not as villains, but as vulnerable. We stand here, quietly, in the center of this moral fog. The idea that someone could be evil is replaced by a deeper, more unsettling idea that we are all shaped, conditioned, constructed by forces unseen. If that is true, then rehabilitation is not a mercy, it's a necessity. And perhaps justice isn't about who deserves to suffer, but who needs to be seen. Now, let us return to the question that lingers beneath every judgment and every whispered why. Not what we do, but what we are. When choice vanishes, what happens to the soul? The soul without will. They say the soul chooses love over hate, forgiveness over vengeance, life over numbness. But what if the soul doesn't choose at all? What if it simply watches? You're sitting on a bus late at night, the kind of ride where the window hums quietly and the streetlights flash like a pulse across your face. Across the aisle, a stranger drops their phone. You pick it up, hand it back. No words, just a soft nod between two people who won't remember names, but might remember the feeling. Was that your choice? Or did your body move before you even knew what it meant? A soft voice drifts through the dark. Do you ever feel like your actions already knew themselves before you did? Sometimes I wonder if my soul is just following the current, not steering. Spiritual traditions, from ancient desert hermits to Eastern mystics, have long tied the soul to moral will. They've whispered that the soul shines brightest when it wrestles with temptation, makes the hard call, stands firm in the fire. But what if that fire is only smoke? What if the choice was never ours? Would that make the soul weaker or stranger? Maybe the soul isn't the general commanding our decisions, but the silent hand holding the past. It cradles the weight of every moment, the warmth of an embrace we no longer recall, the ache of a farewell we never said aloud, the shimmer of beauty glimpsed in something utterly useless, a crack in the ceiling shaped like a bird in flight, and that might be enough. Because the soul doesn't need control to be real. It doesn't need to win battles to be holy. Perhaps it is sacred not because it chooses, but because it remembers, because it feels, because it stays. You pause, lying in your bed, unsure if you're about to fall asleep or rise into another kind of awareness. Your breathing slows, and so does the spinning wheel of questions. There's no need to answer them tonight. No need to measure your worth by the weight of your decisions. Sometimes, just being here, fully, silently, is the rarest form of grace. But if I can't choose, what does that make me? Maybe not a chooser, maybe a witness, maybe something even older than will. The soul, then, is not a sword but a mirror, not a judge, but a well. And into that well we pour every laugh, every scar, every soft, unfinished goodbye. It collects these fragments, not to fix us, but to hold us. And perhaps that is the real miracle. Not that we steer the river, but that we float in it with open eyes. Now, as the current slows, we find ourselves nearing a childlike thought. A playful door cracked open at the edge of dreaming. A question, soft but stirring, waits just ahead. Let us drift there now, gently, into the next wondering, what if you were someone else? A new definition of freedom. There's a moment late at night when the noise of the day has finally faded and you sit quietly with yourself, not to make decisions, not to solve problems, but simply to feel whether your life fits. That's where this segment begins. Harry Frankfurt, the philosopher who reshaped how we think about choice, offered a surprising idea. Freedom, he said, isn't about having endless options. It's about alignment. When your desires are not at war with your actions, when your actions echo your identity, and when your identity feels honest and rooted, you are free. Not because you could have done otherwise, but because what you did was truly you. So you're saying, one voice asks in the quiet of a kitchen conversation, that even if everything was determined, I could still be free? Yes, the other replies, stirring a cup of tea. If what you chose is exactly what your heart wanted to choose. This kind of freedom doesn't defy causality. It dances with it. It's not the power to break the laws of nature, but the ability to move in rhythm with your nature. The old image of freedom as an empty canvas, no constraints, pure spontaneity, starts to feel hollow. Because let's be honest, haven't we all felt overwhelmed when given too much choice? When 1,000 doors are open, walking through any one of them can feel strangely unfree. But when your values, your emotions, your thoughts, and your actions harmonize like chords in a song, that is a different kind of liberty. It's not about escaping the system. It's about not needing to escape it at all. Take the example of a monk in a monastery. He follows strict routines, speaks only when needed, wears the same robe every day. To an outsider, that may look like confinement. But within that structure, the monk may experience profound peace because what he wants aligns with what he does. His identity is in tune with his path. No internal war, no false fronts, just clarity. In contrast, someone with unlimited freedom, countless choices, infinite resources, might still feel trapped. Not by society, but by inner contradictions. Wanting one thing, doing another. Pretending to be someone else. Freedom isn't always about having more doors. It's about having the right one feel like home. So maybe we've misunderstood autonomy. Maybe it's not found in rebellion, but in resonance. Not in the chaos of potential, but in the quiet certainty of coherence. As the moonlight filters through the blinds, the dialogue continues, soft like a whisper of understanding. Do you feel free? I don't always know, but I feel whole. And wholeness, in this new frame, might be the deepest freedom there is. We now leave behind the quest for escape and enter a more intimate realm, where paradoxes become poetry, where logic meets peace, and where the final reflections await. What remains when the search ends? What truths settle into the silence? Let us walk slowly into that closing light. The Hourglass Dilemma. There's something hauntingly soft about silence at midnight. When the noise of the day has dissolved and nothing presses you forward, your mind moves slower, like a feather caught in gravity. And in that slowness, you might see it, the invisible hourglass that's always been there. Its sand falls grain by grain, quiet, certain, final. If you had one last action, someone once whispered, just one grain of sand left, what would you do? It's a question that doesn't demand an answer. It simply lingers. Because it's not about what you choose. It's about what remains when there's nothing left to want. In those imagined last moments, when achievement no longer matters and regret feels like a heavy coat you no longer need to wear, some people reach for love. Others reach inward. But rarely do they reach for power, plans, or perfection. Earlier today, someone held a door open for a stranger. No grand reason, just instinct or kindness. Maybe that's the kind of freedom that surfaces when we stop trying to control the future. When the sand is running out, there's no more room for pretending, and the self steps out from behind the curtain of effort. Two friends sat quietly in the corner of a dim cafe, steam rising between them. I used to think I needed to prove something, one said. And now? Now, I just want to hold space for people I love. This is what philosophers call the sharpening of values under mortality. Not through fear, but clarity. As distractions fall away, the mind doesn't cling tighter. It breathes deeper. The illusion of needing to be someone fades, replaced by simply being. There's a psychological term for this, temporal construal. When time feels short, we think less about strategy and more about meaning. We don't plot, we feel. We don't grasp, we release. Paradoxically, the closer we move toward the end, the freer we feel. Not because we have more options, but because the weight of decision disappears. We no longer live for outcomes, we live from presence. But is this presence truly free? Or is it just the absence of resistance? When there's no longer anything to push against, maybe we stop calling it choice at all. We just are. The hourglass doesn't ask permission. It doesn't rush or pause. It just flows. A woman once sat by her father's bed in hospice. For days, she didn't speak, just held his hand. And in that wordless connection, she said she felt more alive, more conscious than at any other moment in her life. There was nothing to fix, only to feel. That too is a kind of freedom. So maybe this is the Hourglass Dilemma. Not what you would do with your last breath, but what falls away when you no longer need to do it all. And in that stillness, some call it surrender. Others call it grace. A soft exhale into a space that's neither past nor future, but simply now. As the final grains of sand fall one by one, we might come to see that freedom was never about escape or control. Maybe it's not even a thing to have, but a way of letting go. A permission we grant ourselves at the end, when the story doesn't need more chapters, only silence. And now we drift gently to the closing horizon, not the end of time, not the end of you, but the dissolving of edges, the soft blending of choice and stillness, the question that waits beyond the final breath. Can peace be real if freedom never was? You're safe to fall asleep now. There's nothing to solve. Just let the sand fall. The silent answer. There comes a moment, long after the debates fade and the philosophers grow quiet, when the mind no longer asks, not because it has found all the answers, but because it has made peace with not needing them. That moment, the hush after the last theory, is where this final reflection begins. It's tempting to believe that if free will is an illusion, everything else loses meaning. But perhaps it's the opposite. When we stop trying to force meaning through control, we begin to witness it in places we'd never thought to look. In the sunlight, warming your face through a window you didn't choose to sit by. In the softness of a voice you didn't expect to hear. In the strange comfort of a life unfolding like a book you forgot writing, but one that still reads beautifully. "You really think none of it's real?" she asks, her voice hushed as they lie in bed, the city outside already half asleep. "I think," he replies slowly, "that it doesn't matter if we write the story or if the story writes us. We're still in it, still feeling it. And maybe that's enough." There's a strange serenity in surrender. Not the kind that gives up, but the kind that leans in, accepting that we may be moved more than we move, that our laughter, our sorrow, our silent prayers are echoes in a dance choreographed by something neither cruel nor kind, but simply unfolding. When you stop needing to be the author, you can finally fall in love with the page. This final segment doesn't offer one last argument. It doesn't give a triumphant revelation or a grand conclusion. It offers something rarer: stillness. The kind of stillness that lets you forgive not just others, but yourself. Forgive the past you didn't shape, the thoughts that rose unbidden, the choices that might have only felt like choices. You don't need to command the universe to be part of its beauty. You don't have to pick the music to feel the rhythm in your chest. So what if we are waves on an ocean we didn't summon? We are still moving with it, part of its vastness, caught in its glow. And just like that, whether we steer or drift, we become the experience itself. As the night deepens and your eyes grow heavier, let this final idea rest with you. Peace doesn't always ask for power. Sometimes it only asks for presence. And presence, dear listener, is always within reach, no matter who you think is reaching. And now, the questions have quieted. The theories, like stars, have flickered one by one until even the brightest doubts have faded into a hush. Perhaps there was never an answer, only the rhythm of thoughts cascading toward silence. If free will was an illusion, was it a cruel trick or a beautiful performance? Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe the real freedom was never in the choosing, but in the being, in resting within the flow of the river, not fighting its current. So as your breath slows and the edges of the world begin to blur, remember this: you don't need to decide who you are tonight. You only need to be. Let the paradox cradle you. Let sleep find you gently, not with answers, but with peace.